Do you love novels, but don't have time to read thousands of chapters? Imagine listening to your favorite stories anytime, anywhere, while driving, working, or relaxing. Here, you'll find premium audiobooks from Pocket FM, Audible, Webnovel, Wuxia, and more, all in one place. Every novel is a one-time payment, no subscriptions, no monthly fees, lifetime access. The full novel list and prices are in the description below. Once you choose a novel, just DM me on Telegram, WhatsApp, or Discord. After payment via PayPal, Ko-fi, or Patreon, you get permanent access to the audiobook on Telegram. And if the novel is ongoing, all future updates are included. Check the description, pick your story, and start listening today. Before we start the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification button. Enjoy, and let's go.
51, Chapter 51, Five Tails Jinchuriki Han. Everyone exchanged glances, silently agreeing with Wenlan's judgment. However, Minato Namikaze hesitated and said with some reluctance, "But if we launch a surprise attack, a lot of Konoha ninja will die. If we maintain the current stalemate, maybe we can wait until Iwagakure comes to Konoha to negotiate peace." "Highly unlikely." Wenlan snorted and shook his head, crossing his arms. If Iwagakure or Konoha had any intention of peace talks, they would have already sent envoys. But for an entire week, Iwagakure hasn't made a single move. And Konoha definitely won't take the initiative to negotiate. Once we do, it means admitting weakness and giving up our status as the winning side. The Third Great Ninja War has practically drained every major village dry. Our third Hokage wouldn't be willing to pay massive reparations. Nara Shikaku nodded slowly. "That's true. If we strike first, we can seize the initiative and greatly reduce casualties. There will still be losses, but far fewer than if Iwagakure launches a surprise attack." "Then let's vote," Orochimaru said, licking his lips as his hoarse voice echoed through the tent. "All in favor of attacking, raise your hand." Wenlan raised his hand first. Then Fugaku, Hisashi, Shikaku, and after a brief hesitation, Minato also raised his. Minato was kind-hearted, but not foolish. He disliked meaningless sacrifice, yet he would never allow Konoha to fall into a passive position. Orochimaru swept his gaze across the group and said coldly, "Good. Unanimous decision. Mobilize the troops. We attack tonight. Now, let's discuss how." Everyone stepped forward and gathered around the sand table. Shikaku and the others carefully analyzed the terrain and enemy deployment, fingers moving slowly across the model as they simulated optimal attack routes. A night raid depended on speed and concealment. They had to tear open Iwagakure's defenses before the enemy could react, striking straight at the core. Wenlan remained silent, listening carefully. The general plan was as follows. The Uchiha and Hyuga would spearhead the attack, sharing an insight paired with Byakugan vision to swiftly dismantle enemy detection barriers. Next, Minato would lead a rapid strike force to penetrate deep behind enemy lines, cutting off reinforcements. Shikaku would command the Ino Shika Cho clans, stabilizing formations, overseeing the battlefield, and patching any gaps. Suddenly, Wenlan spoke. "What if they deploy a Jinchuriki?" The room fell silent. Everyone froze for a moment, because up until now, aside from Kumagakure, no other village had deployed Jinchuriki. And even Killer Bee hadn't gone all out, only Minato had briefly encountered him. So this critical factor had been overlooked. Iwagakure had 2 Jinchuriki, especially 4 Tails Rashi and 5 Tails Han. If Iwagakure releases a Jinchuriki, the battlefield will instantly spiral out of control, Orochimaru said in a low voice, tapping the edge of the sand table. Jinchuriki wouldn't normally be stationed on the front line. They're kept in the mid or rear areas. No village is willing to use them unless absolutely necessary. Which means, this battle must be fast. Lightning warfare. Wenlan murmured. Shikaku looked at Wenlan and said, "You're coming with us. Among everyone here, only Minato is faster than you, and you can provide immediate support." "All right." Wenlan nodded lightly. The Nara clan might be lazy, but their minds are never disappointed. For generations, Nara clan heads had served as Hokage strategists. Shikaku's plans were always airtight. Night raid. Under the cover of night, large numbers of Konoha ninja silently gathered in the border forest. Clouds obscured the moon, and the wind masked the sound of footsteps. Fugaku and Hisashi led elite members of the Uchiha and Hyuga clans toward the front line. Iwagakure's forward camp was similar in scale to Konoha's, spanning nearly 5 kilometers, filled with tents and bonfires. Many ninjas sat around the fires for warmth, while patrol squads rotated every 30 minutes. Every 5 minutes, a patrol passed through the same route. Under the moonlight, the Sharingan captured every flicker of shadow among the flames, while the Byakugan pierced through tents, tracking chakra flows. Fugaku and Hisashi exchanged a glance, perfect understanding. Fugaku slowly raised his right hand. The three-tomo Sharingan glowed crimson in the darkness as he gave a tactical hand signal. Soon, all ninja lined up in formation, Hyuga in front, Uchiha behind. If Iwagakure counterattacked, the Hyuga could immediately activate rotation to block ninjutsu. Although rotation was once a main family secret, after the Byakugan incident, even branch family members had learned it. All Hyuga now possessed basic mastery of rotation. Fugaku clenched his hands. All Uchiha formed seals at once. Fire release, Phoenix Sage fire technique. Countless fireballs shot into the sky, then rained down like a storm. The fireballs ignited tents on impact. Flames spread at terrifying speed, and in mere moments, the entire Iwagakure frontline camp became a sea of fire. Enemy attack. Panic erupted among the IWA ninja. Firelight shot into the sky as screams echoed everywhere. Charge! Fugaku roared. The Uchiha surged into the flames like a tidal wave, Sharingan flashing coldly through smoke and ash. The Hyuga vanguard had already formed up. With Byakugan locking onto chakra signatures, dozens of figures darted forward, aiming straight for the command tent. Iwagakure was completely suppressed before it could react. Inside the command tent, several jonin hastily tried to resist, but under the Byakugan's scrutiny, they stood no chance. However, just as Hisashi and Fugaku were about to break into the command tent, someone stepped out. Their pupils shrank violently. A man nearly 2 meters tall walked forward slowly. He wore a red conical hat and red mask, red armor plating, and an Iwagakure forehead protector. The steam ninja, Han. The Five Tails Jinchuriki. Damn it! Why is a Jinchuriki here? Fugaku shouted. Hisashi's veins bulged beside his eyes, but his Byakugan trembled. Due to sealing techniques, he couldn't sense the tailed beast's chakra at all. All their plans had been built on the assumption that no Jinchuriki would appear. Now, the plan was shattered. Damn it, when Lan's cursed mouth. Hisashi couldn't help swearing. Retreat! Fugaku roared as he and Hisashi instantly pulled back. Trying to run? Too late. Han sneered. Steam erupted from Han's body. The intense heat warped the air as he kicked off the ground. Boom! The earth exploded beneath his feet. Han shot forward like a cannonball, steam blasting from his calves like jet thrusters, white vapor rolling violently under the moonlight. Han's massive steam-powered fist slammed down. Fugaku reacted instantly, shoving Hisashi away while using the recoil to flip sideways. Boom! The ground collapsed into a massive crater. Rocks and scalding steam blasted outward. Move! Fugaku roared as he sprinted away. While running, he rapidly formed seals, leapt high into the air, twisted his body midair, and unleashed a technique toward Han. Fire release, Great Fire Dragon technique. A colossal fire dragon burst forth, roaring through the night as it engulfed Han's position in blazing flames. Fugaku landed, and continued retreating at full speed. Please donate and support me. 52, Chapter 52, Slashing the Tailed Beast Bomb with a Blade. Seeing Fugaku's Great Fire Dragon technique fly toward Han, Hyuga Hisashi immediately followed suit. He leapt up, twisted midair, and thrust out his right palm, shouting, 8 trigrams, vacuum palm. A sharp chakra shockwave shot forward. The palm wind entwined with the fire release in midair. Wind fed the flames. Fire borrowed the might of the wind. The inferno roared and surged, smashing straight toward Han. Han stared at the enhanced Great Fire Dragon technique without the slightest change in expression. He stomped his right foot heavily into the ground, steam erupting from his body as he clenched his fist. In the next instant, steam condensed into thick white mist. Han leapt skyward like a giant god, punching straight into the blazing torrent. At the moment of impact, steam burst from his elbow like a jet thruster. When fist and flames collided, space itself seemed to freeze. A violent shockwave exploded outward as steam and fire detonated together. The ground cracked open, rubble flying everywhere. Han's punch did not slow in the slightest. He tore straight through the firestorm, his fist wrapped in scalding steam, bearing down on Hisashi's face. Hisashi's pupils shrank. He retreated rapidly, flinging several kunai from his sleeve, but they melted instantly in the surging heat. Han's steam-shrouded fist was already in front of him. Hisashi gritted his teeth. Left with no choice, he decided to gamble everything. He thrust out his right palm, aiming to strike Han's chest and seal his chakra points with gentle fist. But before he could even touch Han's body, the intense steam heat scorched his palm, the flesh blistering and collapsing instantly. The pain made Hisashi's heart jolt, but he didn't stop. This was his only chance. Enduring the agony, he twisted his body and shouted. Rotation. A hemispherical shell of spinning chakra enveloped him, rotating at extreme speed. Han didn't dodge at all. His steam-powered fist slammed directly into the rotating chakra sphere, producing a shrill grinding screech. Humph! Han snorted. Steam burst again from his elbow like a booster, forcibly driving his fist through the rotation and smashing it into Hisashi's chest. Hisashi spat out a mouthful of blood and was blasted backward. Han leapt forward, preparing to finish him. But suddenly, steel wire wrapped tightly around Hisashi's body. In the next instant, the wire snapped taut, yanking Hisashi away. It was Fugaku. Fugaku caught Hisashi, gripping his belt with one hand, and sprinted madly toward the edge of the camp. Han prepared to pursue, but at that moment, an Uegakur ninja rushed over and said respectfully, Lord Han, the enemy is retreating. Please wipe them out in one sweep. Han glanced briefly at the IWA ninja, then at the Konoha forces fleeing into the forest. He frowned slightly, then nodded. The next second, Han leapt into the air. An enormous amount of steam erupted from his body, engulfing him completely. The steam surged like a raging tide, forming the outline of a massive beast, then solidifying. 5 tails, Kokuo. The 5 massive tails swayed behind him. Kokuo spoke in a deep voice. Han, why did you summon me? Moments later, Kokuo looked toward the forest. I see. Kokuo opened his mouth. Purple and crimson chakra spheres rapidly condensed, merging into a gigantic black-violet orb. Tailed Beast Bomb. The tailed beast bomb slowly rotated as it compressed catastrophic energy. The ground trembled, the air warped violently. Fugaku and Hisashi felt the overwhelming chakra behind them. Even the retreating Uchiha and Hyuga ninja stopped and turned to look. Finished. That single word echoed in everyone's mind. There was no escaping an attack of this magnitude, no matter how far they ran. This wasn't ninjutsu. It was pure, colossal chakra. So it's come to this. Fugaku's heart sank. He didn't even know if Susanoo, awakened through the Mangekyo Sharingan, could block such an attack, if he could even awaken it in time. After all, only Hashirama Senjo and Madara Uchiha had ever truly fought tailed beasts, and history never recorded how they subdued them. At that moment, Kokuo fired the tailed beast bomb. It tore across the sky, space seeming to rip apart in its wake. The earth collapsed layer by layer, everything in its path reduced to dust. Fugaku clenched his teeth, his right hand unconsciously reaching toward his left eye. I have no choice. My clan is behind me, I must stop it. Just as the 3 tomo in Fugaku's eyes began to shift, a voice thundered across the battlefield. 7th gate, gate of shock, open. Flame breathing, ultimate art, 9th form, purgatory. Thunder breathing, 7th form, god of fire thunder. Everyone instinctively looked toward the sound. In the sky, a tiny figure shot straight toward the tailed beast bomb. It was Wenlan. Their support position was nearly 2 kilometers away from the front line, yet Kokuo's massive body and the tailed beast bomb's power were visible even from that distance. It was Akimika Choza, using partial expansion, who had enlarged his palm and hurled Wenlan forward with all his strength. At this moment, Uegakur ninja, Uchiha and Hyuga ninja, and the Konoha reinforcements behind them, all stared at that small figure. As 3 explosive roars rang out, blue steam engulfed Wenlan's entire body. Then, like a detonation straight out of a manga panel, blazing orange-red flames erupted violently, instantly engulfing a 100-meter radius. Scorching heat waves expanded in rings, the air screaming and twisting. Finally, arcs of blue lightning wrapped around the flames, dense electric currents crackling and snapping as sparks flew in every direction. The small figure burst forth from the interwoven fire and thunder, like a god descending. As he charged forward, flames transformed into a ferocious fire dragon. Lightning writhed like raging serpents. The two fused together into a devastating golden, flame-wreathed thunder dragon, hurtling straight toward the descending tailed beast bomb. "Break for me!" A young, furious shout shook the heavens. The golden dragon, carrying apocalyptic flames and thunderous might, slammed head-on into the tailed beast bomb. The explosion shook the earth. A circular shockwave blasted outward, mountains cracking, dust clouds soaring sky-high. The two forces locked for a split second. Then the tailed beast bomb was forcibly split in half, torn open from the center. The remaining energy surged upward and detonated in the sky. A colossal mushroom cloud rose into the air. The night was flooded with blinding light, as bright as day, so intense it burned the eyes. Yet through that white radiance, everyone could still see it. That lone figure. Standing in midair, blade in hand, flames and golden lightning entwined around his body. When the light faded, the earth below was carved with an unfathomably deep chasm. Kokuo's pupils shrank in disbelief. A being so small, had shaken the power of a tailed beast. Wenlan hovered briefly in the air, breathing heavily. The thunder and flames gradually faded as he landed firmly in front of Fugaku and Hisashi. His eyes locked onto Kokuo. Residual lightning and fire still danced along his blade, illuminating the resolute outline of the boy standing against a tailed beast. Please donate and support me. 53, Chapter 53, A's Regret. That was a tailed beast's attack. That kid. Golden Thunder Flame. It's the Golden Thunder Flame Wenlan. Voices erupted among the Uegakur ninja as many recognized Wenlan's identity. In an instant, discussion surged like a tidal wave, shock, disbelief, and fear mixing together. Even the Konoha side began to stir, murmurs spreading rapidly through the ranks. But Narashikaka didn't freeze for even a second. He immediately issued the order to advance. 2 kilometers away, Konoha ninja surged forward toward the Uchiha and Hyuga positions. Thousands of ninja faced off against Uegakur. Dust billowed into the air, chakra pressure rolling like waves. The oppressive tension between the two sides was almost suffocating. Wenlan descended from the air and stood at the center of the battlefield. Golden lightning danced around his body as his cold gaze swept across the enemy formation. "Muo," Wenlan shouted, pointing at the massive form of the Five Tails. "Are you sure you want to be my enemy?" Muo's pupils shrank violently. Its enormous body trembled slightly, as if that single sentence had pierced memories buried deep within time. It remembered its carefree days after being born, remembered the kindness of the Sage of Six Paths. "Who are you?" Muo lowered its head to look at Wenlan, its voice trembling. "How do you know my name?" "Who I am isn't important," Wenlan replied calmly. "I'll ask you again, do you intend to be my enemy?" Muo's eyes flickered. It didn't know Wenlan's true identity, but its name had never been told to anyone, not even to its compatible host, Han. Yet this boy knew it. That meant only one of two possibilities. Either he was connected to the Sage of Six Paths, or he was a direct inheritor of the Sage's will. Muo's breathing grew heavy. Tailed beast chakra surged around it, yet it failed to condense into an attack. It stared at Wenlan's eyes that seemed to see through everything. Finally, it lowered its head. "I understand," Muo said slowly. "But I hope that one day, you'll tell me why you know my name." "Of course," Wenlan answered. Boom. Steam exploded outward as Muo's form dispersed, revealing Han, now visibly weakened. Han frowned, clutching his abdomen. He had seen everything from inside. To be honest, when Wenlan sliced apart the tailed beast bomb, even Han had been terrified. But what truly unsettled him now was Wenlan calling Muo by name. After so many years together, Han himself hadn't even known Muo's true name. Han staggered forward a step. Releasing the tailed beast had nearly drained all his chakra. He was in a severe weakened state. In a deep, hoarse voice, he said, "This war, you've won." More importantly, Wenlan cutting the tailed beast bomb had utterly crushed Uegakur's morale. And Wenlan's aura hadn't weakened at all. If fighting resumed, every IWA ninja present might die. As Han spoke, the Uegakur formation collapsed in spirit. Many hands gripping weapons began to tremble. "Don't worry," Narashikaku stepped forward and said calmly. "We'll treat the prisoners well. You'll be detained, and once the war ends, Uegakur can pay to redeem you." Han nodded, then raised his hand, signaling the remaining Uegakur ninja to lay down their weapons. "There's one more thing," Han added. "I want to let one person go to report what happened here to the Tsuchikage." "No problem," Shikaku replied. The dust slowly settled. Silence reclaimed the battlefield. Then the Konoha side erupted in cheers of victory. Amid the cheers, countless ninja looked at Wenlan with reverence, shouting his name at the top of their lungs. Golden Thunder Flame! Golden Thunder Flame! Hero Wenlan! Hero Wenlan! Even the Uchiha and Hyuga clans gazed at Wenlan with gratitude. They all knew, if not for him, once that tailed beast bomb landed, they would all be dead. Standing amid the ruined battlefield, Wenlan calmly looked over every exhausted, yet relieved face. He raised his voice and shouted, "Everyone! Victory in war never belongs to one person alone. My strength by itself means nothing, only unity allows us to move forward. The peace of Konoha, the future of Konoha, is built with your flesh and blood. This victory belongs to every single one of you. I am only a part of Konoha. Every one of you is a hero." As his words echoed, pride surged through the crowd. Eyes reddened with emotion. A Hyuga ninja suddenly shouted, "To hell with being a hero. I don't care about that, I just know I owe you my life, Wenlan." "Damn right. I owe you my life. If anything ever happens to you, I'll go through fire and blades to help you. I owe you my life too." In an instant, voices shouting, "I owe you my life," surged like a tide, echoing across the battlefield ruins. Nearby, Shikaku stared at Wenlan in astonishment. He understood perfectly what those words meant. This was the highest art of uniting hearts, achieving leadership through humility. By deliberately lowering his own value, Wenlan made others feel injustice on his behalf. Once that emotion fermented, it would transform, on future missions and battlefields, into absolute trust and unwavering loyalty. And that trust was far harder to destroy than raw power. Hisashi walked up beside Wenlan and placed a hand on his shoulder. "I know why you said those things," Hisashi said firmly. "But they're right, I owe you my life." Wenlan smiled slightly and gripped Hisashi's hand. After returning to camp, Konoha forces imprisoned the Uegakur captives. Meanwhile, news of the battle spread across the ninja world as if it had grown wings. Kumigakur stood grim-faced, staring at the intelligence report in his hands. He read it over and over, his head buzzing. Back then, when his father fought the Eight Tails bare-handed, the entire ninja world had been shaken, but that was still just physical combat. Now someone had blocked a tailed beast bomb with a human body. It was utterly unbelievable. Golden Thunder Flame. Wenlan suddenly stood up. Lightning chakra flared, instantly reducing the report to ash. He regretted it now, deeply. Why hadn't he killed Wenlan the moment he first heard of him? Now he could only watch as Konoha produced yet another terrifying powerhouse. Uegakur. Oniki sat on his stone chair, gripping the battle report so tightly his knuckles turned white. Standing beside him were his son Kitsuki and the Four Tails Jinchuriki, Rashi. The three of them wore different expressions. They didn't want to believe the report, but Han had been captured, and the account had come directly from returning Uegakur ninja. Belief was no longer optional. Oniki slowly closed his eyes. After a long moment, he opened them again, exhaustion filling his gaze. Uegakur has lost. Rashi said nothing, only closing his eyes in silence. In raw strength, he was comparable to Han. But when it came to the power of a tailed beast bomb, the Five Tails was undoubtedly stronger than the Four Tails. Yet a single Konoha ninja had sliced apart the Five Tails bomb. That alone was enough to inspire fear. And the most terrifying fact of all, that opponent was only 5 years old. 5 years old. Above Kage level. In the past, no one would have dared to even speak such words. Yet now, it stood unmistakably before them as reality. Please donate and support me. 54, Chapter 54, The War Ends. Inside Konoha. Hiruzen Sarutobi, Shimura Danzo, Mitokado Homura, and Yuditen Koharu sat together in the Hokichi's office. Each of them held an identical intelligence report. The report detailed, step by step, how Wenlan cleaved a tailed beast bomb with a blade and captured the Five Tails Jinchuriki alive. As the document lay before them, all four were breathing noticeably faster. They weren't just shocked by Wenlan's strength, they understood something far more serious. They could no longer suppress Wenlan. Or rather, they could no longer suppress the Uchiha clan. The deterrence of the Uchiha had already grown beyond what Konoha's authority could easily shake. This report could not be buried. In just a few days, the entire ninja world would know what had happened. This time, Wenlan had effectively saved thousands of Konoha ninja. And those thousands were not all clan members, many were civilian-born ninja. Civilian ninja had families. Their families would be grateful to Wenlan, this life-saving hero, and by extension, grateful to the Uchiha. All those years of deliberate smear campaigns against the Uchiha. With this single battle, the clan's reputation would undergo a heaven-shaking reversal. Behind this merit stood the unstoppable rise of the Uchiha clan. And Wenlan himself, having saved so many, was a hero in every sense of the word. I told you long ago that suppressing the Uchiha would backfire, but you wouldn't listen. Danzo slammed the report onto the desk and glared at Hiruzen, his voice low with fury. If we'd worked with Kirigakure and killed him back then, would we be dealing with this now? Hiruzen remained silent, the wrinkles on his forehead carved deep like knife marks. He regretted it. He should have listened to his old friend. But there was no medicine for regret in this world. In the days that followed, Wenlan's name quietly spread throughout Konoha. Gratitude from civilians. Respect from ninja. Like a rising tide, it all flowed toward the Uchiha clan. Even when the Konoha military police force carried out their duties, those who used to cause trouble or deliberately oppose the Uchiha now restrained themselves. Some people even took the initiative to nod politely at Uchiha members on the street. The sudden change in attitude left many Uchiha feeling almost overwhelmed. Yet with it came an unprecedented sense of pride, reverence, and belonging toward Wenlan, as if he alone had shouldered the dignity of the entire clan. There were even families with daughters who practically wore down the threshold of the Uchiha clan head's residence. Everyone knew Wenlan was close to the clan head's family. Marrying a daughter to Wenlan meant climbing straight to the top. Of course, Wenlan, still at the front lines, knew none of this. Half a month passed in the blink of an eye. Iwagakure officially announced that it would enter peace negotiations with Konoha, marking the end of the Third Great Ninja War. Orders soon followed from the village. All operations were to cease. The third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, would personally negotiate peace with the third Tsuchikage, Oniki. The news swept across the front lines like the wind. At first, the soldiers stared at one another, then joy bloomed on their faces. The shadow of war finally lifted. Laughter, long absent, returned to the camps. They all knew. If the peace talks succeeded, they would live. Preparations for the negotiations soon began. As the victorious side, Konoha would host the treaty signing 1 week later at the Fire Daimyo's residence, with 4 parties present. The Hokage, the Fire Daimyo, the Tsuchikage, the Earth Daimyo. Only a small force remained on the front lines for vigilance. The rest withdrew in batches, returning to their homes. Wenlan knew the truth well. This peace produced no true victor and no true loser, only a compromise born of mutual devastation. Even without him cleaving the tailed beast bomb, the two sides would have negotiated peace after a few more months. War dragged on too long, and ninja and civilians alike suffered unbearably. More importantly, both sides had nearly bled their foundations dry. The Third Great Ninja War emptied the coffers of every major village. Kirigakure barely dodged part of it, only to be thoroughly wrecked later by Obito's rampage. As for the peace between Iwagakure and Konoha, it was simply a dignified ending to a slaughter that had exhausted national strength. When the relief forces arrived at the front lines, the frontline ninja packed their gear, escorted the IWA prisoners, and began the journey home. A massive procession returned to Konoha. At the village gates, civilians lined up on both sides, cheering at the top of their lungs to welcome the victors home. Yet the Uchiha clan members walked forward with cold expressions, saying nothing. They knew full well. These cheers weren't meant for them. Over the years, under Hiruzen and Danzo, the Uchiha's reputation had long since been dragged through the mud. Wenlan walked silently at the edge of the formation, scanning the cheering crowd, yet feeling no sense of belonging. Just as the Uchiha prepared, as always, to quietly return to their district. Suddenly, a shout erupted from the crowd. It's the Uchiha! Heroes! Heroes! Golden Thunder Flame! Wenlan! Uchiha! Heroes! The sudden cheers directed at the Uchiha left every single clan member stunned, including Wenlan himself. Civilians shoved fruit and food into their arms. Some elderly people wiped away tears as they shouted thanks. Someone even dragged a ninja from the formation in front of Wenlan, knelt down, and kowtowed in gratitude. Only then did Wenlan realize. These were the families of civilian ninja. A warm sensation spread through his chest. He had never imagined that the village which once regarded the Uchiha as a calamity would shout such sincere cheers. Wenlon stood there dazed, apples filling his arms, his name echoing again and again in his ears. As if a glacier long frozen in his heart had quietly cracked. He suddenly understood. Not every heart was rotted by prejudice. Not every effort went unseen. In this battle, he hadn't just cleaved a tailed beast bomb. He had cleaved open the thick barrier between the clan and the village. Wenlon. A clear, lively voice rang out from nearby. Wenlon turned toward it and saw Inyazuka Hana standing in the crowd. The instant their eyes met, Hana sprinted forward and leapt into his arms, hugging his neck tightly. Wenlon smiled softly, patting her back. "Don't worry," he said gently. "I'm back." She answered softly, but her arms around his neck didn't loosen in the slightest. Wenlon turned to Yakumo, no, Yagura, standing beside him. "Have the clan head take you to my estate," he said. "There are plenty of rooms. Pick one and stay there for now." With that, he took Hana's hand, slipped out of the formation, and ran off to the side. Inside the procession, Inyazuka Gaku, saw the scene and his face instantly darkened. He was part of the triumphant return too. Yet in his precious daughter's eyes, there was only that damned Uchiha brat. For a moment, Inyazuka Gaku felt a powerful urge to kill Wenlon. Then Inyazuka emerged from the crowd holding a small bottle. She dipped her finger into it, smeared a streak of oil paint across Gaku's face, and smiled. "Welcome home." Gaku's dark expression finally broke into a grin. "I'm back. Please donate and support me." 55, Chapter 55, The Funeral. Wenlon held Inyazuka Hana's hand as they strolled along the riverbank. The water flowed quietly, reflecting the gradually fading sunset at the horizon. He gently tightened his grip on her hand, feeling its warmth and softness. A breeze passed by, lifting the hems of their clothes, as if drawing their hearts closer as well. In the distance, mountains cast mottled shadows under the setting sun, silent sentinels bearing witness to this moment of peace and beauty. The scent of flowers drifted through the air with the wind, like the quiet overture of fate unfolding, intoxicating and gentle. Wenlon turned his head and saw Hana's hair tips dyed gold and crimson by the sunset, like a silhouette stepped out of a dream. Hana grew shy under his gaze, her face reddening as she lowered her head. Neither of them spoke. They sat down by the river, and Wenlon relaxed onto the grass, staring at the clouds burning red in the sky. Hana leaned lightly against his shoulder, closing her eyes and savoring the calm of the moment. Wenlon breathed in her unique fragrance, mixed with the grassy scent carried by the evening breeze, and a deep, indescribable peace welled up inside him. There were no sweet words between them, only quiet companionship, which felt like the most comfortable state of all. The last trace of sunset faded from the horizon, and silvery ripples spread across the river's surface, like scattered stars leaping softly. Hana spoke gently, "If only time could stop right now." Wenlon turned to look at her, starlight and her reflection mirrored in his eyes. "From now on," he said softly, "I'll sit like this with you every dusk." She smiled faintly without answering, simply tightening her grip on his hand. Night descended tenderly. The wind remained light, the river kept flowing, and their hearts quietly fell into the same rhythm. Early the next morning, everyone in Konoha, including the Uchiha clan, changed into black attire to attend the memorial for the fallen of the war. Hiruzen Sarutobi stood on a high platform, gazing solemnly at the sea of black-clad people below. The morning breeze stirred the candles before the memorial tablets, their flames flickering and reflecting on faces filled with grief. He slowly began to speak, his voice deep and steady. "This war took many lives, fathers, mothers, children. But they are Konoha's heroes, Konoha's pride. Today, we send off their spirits with the grandest ceremony, praying for their souls to rest in peace. Every name will be engraved upon the memorial stone, remembered for eternity. This is our promise to the fallen, and our warning to the living, to protect this hard-won peace. May the wind carry our remembrance. May the earth bear their achievements. Konoha will never forget the peace and dignity they brought with their lives. With their blood, they wrote Konoha's history. With their lives, they built the village's foundation. They perfectly inherited the will of fire. Where Konoha's leaves dance, the fire shall burn unceasingly, its light illuminating the village and allowing new leaves to sprout." The crowd stood in silence, a wordless sorrow spreading through the air. Many people carried coffins toward the burial grounds before the memorial stone, their steps heavy yet orderly. Each coffin was draped with a Konoha forehead protector, symbolizing a ninja's final dignity and honor. Children clutched candles. Parents sobbed softly. The elders closed their eyes in prayer. The entire ceremony was steeped in solemnity and grief. White chrysanthemums were placed one by one before the memorial stone. Petals fluttered in the wind, settling between the engraved names. Hannah gently laid a chrysanthemum down, her gaze lingering on those familiar yet unfamiliar names, her heart aching with sorrow. After the funeral, a fine rain began to fall, as if even the heavens were mourning the dead. Wenlon bought grain supplies and headed to Mike Dewey's home. Dewey lived deep in the mountains, in a small wooden cabin. Rain drizzled softly outside, and a wind chime under the eaves gave off faint sounds. Wenlon knocked on the door. A hoarse voice came from inside. "Come in." He pushed the door open. The room was dim, lit only by the glow of a stove. Mike Dewey was standing on his head beside the stove, one hand behind his back, the other supporting himself with a single finger. Veins bulged on his forehead as sweat streamed down his face. "Oh, the young man's here." Dewey flipped upright at once, clapping his hands and grinning brightly. Wenlon glanced at the bandages on Dewey's chest, faintly stained with blood, and said helplessly, "Senior Dewey, can't you just rest properly? If you didn't train like this every day, you'd have healed long ago." Dewey scratched his head and laughed. "I'm used to it. A day without training makes my whole body uncomfortable." He picked up a kettle from the stove and poured Wenlon a cup of water. Wenlon set down over 400 jin of grain. "If it really doesn't work, come live in the Uchiha district. My estate's huge, and I'm the only one there, plenty of space." "No need," Dewey refused again. This wasn't the first time Wenlon had suggested it, and Dewey had refused every time. Unsurprised, Wenlon kicked the grain sack lightly and sat across from him. "I bought 400 jin of grain for you and Kai. And over 100 jin of meat." "What? No, take it back." Dewey waved his hands frantically. "We have food." "Food my ass," Wenlon rolled his eyes. "You can't take missions right now, and Kai's still a genin, team pay doesn't amount to much. Taijutsu eats the most food. You want Kai to survive on thin air while doing missions." Dewey fell silent. After a moment, he looked at Wenlon seriously, then suddenly dropped to his knees and kowtowed. "Thank you, young man." Wenlon hurriedly helped him up. "Don't do that. I'm not giving it for free anyway. Didn't you forget you're teaching me the 8 gates?" "Haha, true enough." Dewey laughed, scratching his head. Not long after, Might Guy returned as well. After attending the funeral, he'd gone straight to training. Seeing Wenlon, he froze for a moment, then grinned. "Wenlon, this time I really owe it to you." Wenlon looked puzzled. Guy hadn't gone to the Uegakure frontlines after Kirigakure. Guy quickly explained, "Because of our actions with you during the Kirigakure operations, several of those missions were classified as S rank. The appointment came down today. I've been promoted to Chinin." "Oh." Wenlon was surprised, then felt it made sense. "Congratulations." Guy had long possessed Chinin level strength. After chatting a bit more, Wenlon took his leave. Back at his estate, Yagura sat by the pond, watching the fish swim beneath the surface. Her fingers lightly stirred the water, sending ripples outward. Water used so extravagantly to raise fish was something unimaginable in Tsunagakure. Please donate and support me. 56, Chapter 56, Rebuking Uchiha Fugaku. Don't keep playing with the fish. They'll die easily. Wenlon walked in with both hands clasped behind his head. I wasn't." Yagura's face flushed bright red in an instant. She stood up awkwardly, as if she'd been caught doing something wrong. Her fingers trembled slightly, the tips of her ears turning red. She lowered her eyes, not daring to look at Wenlon directly, and subconsciously tried to explain. "I've just never seen water being used so extravagantly that people raise fish with it." Wenlon froze for a moment, then remembered what Tsunagakure was like, water barely sufficient for drinking, let alone something as luxurious as keeping fish. "You like playing with water?" Wenlon eyed Yagura suspiciously, then his gaze shifted and he grinned. "Come on. I'll let you play to your heart's content." 30 minutes later. Veins bulged on Yagura's forehead as she stared at the sink full of freshly used bowls and chopsticks, the faucet pouring out water with a constant splash. Letting her wash vegetables was one thing. She'd cooked the meal, picked the vegetables herself, and now she had to wash the dishes too. Meanwhile, Wenlan lay comfortably on the tatame, lazily remarking, "Don't be shy. Use the water however you want." Yagura clenched her teeth and glared at him viciously. "Are you even human?" Wenlan picked his teeth with a toothpick, completely unfazed. "Hey, it's not like you met me yesterday. Back in Kirigakure, didn't you say my tactics were vicious?" He stopped mid-sentence, froze, then suddenly sat upright. Yagura jumped. "What is it?" "I'm going to see the clan head," Wenlan said seriously. "Go rest early." He rushed out of the courtyard. Yagura watched his retreating figure, confusion swirling in her mind. In the end, she shook her head and went back to washing dishes. Wenlan strode into the Uchiha clan head's residence. Inside, Fugaku and his family were eating dinner. Mikoto smiled warmly. "Wenlan, you're here. Have you eaten? Sit and have some." "I've already eaten." Wenlan waved it off, took off his shoes, stepped onto the tatame, and went straight to the point. "Clan head, where are the 5 swords of the 7 ninja swordsmen?" Fugaku paused, then set down his chopsticks and wiped his mouth. "They were taken by the Hokage." Wenlan tilted his head, staring blankly at Fugaku. "Then where are the benefits?" "Benefits?" Fugaku looked puzzled. "Fuck." Wenlan slammed the table and shot to his feet, roaring, "Those were earned with my life. 5 ninja blades. Do you have any idea what those mean in the shinobi world? Priceless weapons. And that old bastard Hiruzen dares to take them without saying a word. Fugaku Uchiha, you sell out your own family and don't even feel the pain. Have you thought about how many resources those blades could be exchanged for? How many clan members need treatment? How many need equipment? 5 swords are enough to buy half of Tsunagakure's war supplies, and you just gave them away. Some high-level decisions. When the Byakugan was stolen, where was this efficiency then?" Fugaku's expression darkened. "It's already been decided. It can't be changed." "To hell with, can't be changed." Wenlan flung off Ataka's hand as the boy tried to stop him and glared at Fugaku. "You've awakened the Mangekyo, haven't you? Then why the hell don't you just activate Susanoo and stand in front of the Hokage Tower? See if those 4 old fossils would dare say a word then." Fugaku's pupils shrank violently. He had awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan, but he'd told no one. Not even his wife. Mikoto stared at him in shock. "You awakened the Mangekyo?" Itaka looked completely lost. He didn't even know what a Mangekyo was. "How do you know?" Fugaku demanded. Wenlan sneered. "How do I know? You should be asking what there is that I don't know." His 3-tomo Sharingan spun open instantly. "Clan head, if you still think appeasement and patience will lead the Uchiha to a better future, then I can already see it, every single clan member dead under your wise leadership." Wenlan was truly furious. 5 ninja blades, that was an astronomical value. If the Uchiha had them, the entire clan could be armed to the teeth. Even the 3rd Hokage wouldn't dare touch them lightly. But now they were in Hiruzen's hands, tools to restrain the Uchiha in the future. Fugaku had been sold out and still helped count the money. "I'm going to get those swords back." Wenlan turned to leave. Fugaku rushed forward and grabbed his wrist. This wasn't decided by the Uchiha alone. All the clans voted. "Then vote again." Wenlan snapped, coldly staring at him. "I took those blades with my life. They're mine, not the clan's. No one gets to take what I earned with my life. You're afraid activating Susanoo will escalate conflict, but they've never intended to give you peace. Once those blades turn into resources in their hands, the first ones they'll suppress will be the Uchiha. Those 4 old men have been suppressing us for decades. Do you think this is new? Your so-called restraint is pushing the entire clan into the fire." Wenlan shook off Fugaku's hand and glared at the cowardly clan head before striding toward the exit. "Wenlan." Fugaku grabbed his arm again. "This is to pave the way for Minato. Hiruzen has already made it clear, he intends to pass the 4th Hokage position to Minato. To become Hokage, you need the support of most clans. Handing over the swords was my way of showing our stance. Minato is the Uchiha's future hope. You can't only see what's right in front of you." "Hope?" Wenlan looked at him coldly. "Minato becomes the 4th Hokage with or without those swords. 2 of the Sannin are gone. Orochimaru will never be Hokage. The only possible successor is Jiraiya's student, Namikaze Minato. And do you really think Kushina's 9 tails is just decoration?" Fugaku froze. He'd never thought that far ahead. He'd been so desperate to push the Uchiha into the higher echelons that he'd ignored everything else. Hiruzen had seized that weakness perfectly, using an empty promise to strip the Uchiha of 5 blades worth an unimaginable fortune. Please donate and support me. 57, Chapter 57, Becoming a Rogue Ninja. Fugaku frowned as he looked at Wenlan. Things have already reached this point. There's no way out anymore. No way out. Wenlan sneered. Then reopen the high-level council. Without another word, Wenlan stepped out of the Uchiha compound and headed straight for the Hokage building. At the entrance, 2 guards immediately stopped him. Stop. The Hokage building is closed. If you have business, come back tomorrow. Wenlan's gaze sharpened. He drew a deep breath, chakra surging into his dantian and rushing up to his throat as he roared. Hokage sir. I, Uchiha Wenlan, ask the High Council, are all spoils of war obtained at the cost of a ninja's life automatically owned by the village? The voice thundered across the area. Nearly half of Konoha could hear it. Nearby civilians instinctively turned to look. Wenlan stood tall, expression calm and unyielding, staring straight at the Hokage building doors. Moments later, bang! The doors flew open. Hiruzen Sarutobi, Koharu Yudatan, Homura Mitokado, Danzo Shimura, Orochimaru, and Namikaze Minato stepped out together. ANBU operatives swiftly moved to disperse the civilians, pushing them several streets away. Danzo's face was dark as thunder as he stared at the boy before him, murderous intent nearly spilling from his eyes. Hiruzen's expression stiffened for a brief moment, but when he noticed the villagers being escorted away, he quickly softened his face. Ah, Wenlan. What seems to be the matter? Wenlan met Hiruzen's gaze directly, his voice clear and cold. I want to ask the Hokage directly, if spoils obtained by a ninja at the risk of their life are taken away without even consulting the ninja himself, is that truly the village's way? Hiruzen fell silent for a moment. His eyes swept across the surrounding onlookers before he spoke slowly. Spoils of war are communal resources of the village. However, individual contributions will be recorded in the archives. Recorded in the archives. Wenlan laughed coldly. So you're saying I risked my life to bring back spoils worth an entire small nation, got beaten half to death in the process, and in the end I got nothing, just a line in some archive. Danzo slammed his cane heavily against the ground and barked, Brat, don't push your luck. Wenlan spun around sharply, glaring straight at Danzo, his 3 tomos sharing and blazing crimson without a trace of fear. Old dog, I wasn't talking to you. I'm speaking with the Hokage. What the hell are you? And who do you think you are? A 5.5. Danzo's face turned pitch black. He didn't understand what 5.5 meant, but the sheer disrespect made his blood boil. His entire body trembled as he smashed his cane into the ground again. By now, many clan heads had arrived. Hayaga Hayashi, Nara Shikaku, Yamanaka Inoichi, and others. Wenlan slowly swept his gaze across them, his voice firm as iron. Today I'm not standing here for spoils of war. I'm standing here to ask one question. He paused, every word ringing like steel. Exactly how much is a ninja's life worth? We bleed and die, and what we get in return is indifference and plunder. Is this the will of fire you speak of? Silence fell over the crowd. Countless eyes flicked back and forth between Wenlan and the village leadership. Hayashi narrowed his eyes slightly. Shikaku let out a quiet sigh. Inoichi frowned deeply. Minato's gaze wavered, his lips parting as if he wanted to speak, yet he didn't. Hiruzen's face grew heavy. At last, he spoke. Wenlan, your contributions will not be forgotten by the village. The system for distributing spoils does exist, but systems can be changed. He paused, then looked toward the surrounding ninja. From today onward, we will establish a merit reward system. Rewards will be issued directly based on mission risk and individual contribution. A ripple passed through the crowd. Many ninjas' eyes lit up with hope. Wenlan stared straight at Hiruzen and sneered. Then according to the Hokage's words, my 5 ninja blades still won't be returned to me. Hiruzen hesitated, then slowly shook his head. The ninja blades are strategic assets. They must be kept under unified village control. Wenlan threw his head back and laughed loudly, mockery dripping from his voice. Unified control, what a fine excuse. Then let me ask one more question. His gaze burned as it swept across everyone present. If the enemy attacks tomorrow, who will defend this village? You people sitting high above, or us ninja whose lives are worth so little they can be stripped bare. The wind swept across the square, stirring dust and silence alike. Hiruzen's expression hardened like iron. It will be you, and every Konoha ninja, he said gravely. That is precisely why this merit system must truly be implemented, not as charity, but as rightful compensation. If it's rightful compensation, when Lan snapped, then my spoils should belong to me. He ripped the forehead protector from his arm and hurled it to the ground. Drawing his blade, he pressed its edge against the metal plate. Either return my spoils, or let Konoha gain a Kage-level rogue ninja. You decide. Every face present changed color, including Hiruzen's. The air seemed to freeze solid. Hayashi's hand tightened unconsciously. Shikaka murmured under his breath, it shouldn't have come to this. Lan, don't. Minato shouted in alarm, rushing forward, only to be repelled by an invisible surge of chakra. Danzo had intervened. His teeth were clenched as he roared. Lan, you are threatening the entire village. So what if I am? Lan laughed coldly, the blade screeching against the forehead protector. If I can protect the village with Kage-level strength, then I can just as easily abandon it. And don't pretend you don't know, your 4 old men have suppressed the Uchiha for decades, excluded dissenters, and crushed anyone who didn't fall in line. Everyone knows it, they just don't dare say it. What they don't dare to say, I will say. What they don't dare to do, I will do. Hiruzen's gaze grew unfathomably deep. At last, he raised his hand, stopping the Anbu who were about to move. If you truly are willing to use Kage-level strength to protect Konoha, then these 5 ninja blades, I will allow you to manage them on the village's behalf. So you still refuse to return them? Lan didn't want a compromise. He wanted a clear answer. Zing. The blade scraped violently across the forehead protector, sparks flying. A deep horizontal slash appeared across the metal. From this day on, Lan declared coldly, lifting the slashed protector with his blade and tying it around his arm. I, Uchiha Lan, officially become a rogue ninja of Konoha. What you want isn't a protector, it's an obedient dog. Too bad. I never was. I'm leaving the village now. Whoever isn't afraid of death, come and stop me. The air was as heavy as steel. No one dared to breathe. When Lan turned to leave, Danzo, furious beyond restraint, roared, "Kill him!" From the shadows, over a dozen root operatives burst forth, forming a semicircle around Lan. Kunao and explosive tags gleamed with killing intent. Since you won't let me leave, Lan shouted coldly as he tightened his grip on the blade. Then I'll collect a little interest first. 8 gates technique, 6th gate, gate of view, open. Boom. Violent chakra exploded outward, hurricane wind sweeping the plaza as green chakra engulfed Lan's body. He raised his blade. Green chakra instantly ignited into roaring flames. Flame breathing, ultimate art, 9th form purgatory. Please donate and support me. 58, Chapter 58, Izanage. As Lan roared in fury, his right foot slammed into the ground. Flames erupted from beneath his feet in an instant. Boom. The earth shattered violently as scorching fire surged upward like a raging earth dragon, shooting straight into the sky. Bathed in firelight, Lan's figure looked like a war god descending upon the mortal world. Shockwaves rippled outward, and sand and stone melted into crimson liquid under the extreme heat. The air was filled with a searing, choking scent. Even the wooden beams supporting the Hokage building began to bend under the invisible thermal pressure. Everyone present turned pale. Such terrifying flames. Such overwhelming chakra output. This was no power a human should be able to withstand. When Lan burst out of the inferno in a flash, his blade carving a crimson arc through the air, letting out a piercing shriek. A massive fire dragon surged forth from the edge of his blade, coiling skyward like a wrathful deity. Its flaming jaws gaped wide as it lunged straight at the root operatives. Water release, water formation wall. Earth release, earth-style wall. Water release, water dragon bullet technique. Water release, great waterfall technique. Almost all of the root ninja reacted instantly, erecting layered defenses, attempting to use water release to extinguish the raging flames. Like a mantis trying to stop a chariot, Lan sneered. His blade did not slow in the slightest. The fire dragon roared as it smashed through the water barriers. The torrential flames instantly vaporized the water, turning it into rolling white steam that engulfed the battlefield. The ground beneath the root operatives cracked inch by inch under the heat. Their earth walls softened and collapsed like melting wax. When Lan stepped forward, chakra erupted like a volcano. His blade slashed again. A second fire dragon, wrapped in blazing crimson gold flames, shot into the sky and swallowed several ninja whole. Before any screams could escape, their bodies were reduced to charred fragments, scattering with the wind. Under the flickering firelight, the land had become a true purgatory. And at the heart of it stood Wen Lan alone, coldly surveying the carnage. He suddenly twisted his head toward Danzo Shimura and snarled. "Since you don't want me to live in peace, then no one will. Old dog, let me see if that right eye of yours, that Sharingan stolen from Uchiha Kagami, can really save your life." Danzo's face changed dramatically. He had never imagined that his greatest secret would be exposed so blatantly. The surrounding ninja snapped their gazes toward Danzo, and when they saw his expression collapse, they instantly knew Wen Lan was telling the truth. Even Hiruzen Sarutobi stared at Danzo in shock. "Danzo, you..." Before he could finish, thunder breathing. The flames around Wen Lan's body transformed instantly into golden lightning. In the next heartbeat, his figure appeared directly in front of Danzo. His left hand shot out and clamped onto Danzo's right eye, ripping it free with brutal force. "Ah!" Danzo screamed in agony, clutching his face as blood poured through his fingers. Wen Lan raised the bloody eyeball high. Everyone stared in horror at the scarlet Sharingan in his hand. The eye trembled violently within the lightning, blood vessels writhing like living things, faintly revealing the outline of 3 Tomo. "Hokage, sir!" Uchiha Fugaku's furious roar rang out from nearby. "The Uchiha clan demands an explanation." Fugaku hadn't intended to come at first. But the moment he heard the commotion near the Hokage building, he knew Wen Lan had gone too far. He immediately gathered all Uchiha Jonin, planning to bring Wen Lan back by force if necessary. But the moment he arrived, he saw Wen Lan ripping out Danzo's eye, and that unmistakable Sharingan in his hand. The Sharingan that once belonged to Uchiha Kagami was now exposed before everyone's eyes. The air froze solid. Faces twisted with shock, fury, and dread. It was no secret that Danzo coveted the secret techniques of other clans. The Yamanaka and Abarame clans had already been forced to provide people under pressure. But this time, he had reached out even to the remains of a deceased comrade. Everyone had clearly heard Wen Lan say it was Uchiha Kagami's Sharingan. If Danzo could gouge out the eye of a fallen comrade who once fought alongside him, what wouldn't he do? The strongest reaction came from the Hyuga clan. If today it was the Uchiha's Sharingan, then tomorrow, would it be the Hyuga's Byakugan? A chill ran through the crowd. Trust in Konoha's leadership began to crack. Wen Lan naturally noticed their reactions. He wasn't just killing. He was destroying hearts and faith. Hyuga Hayashi immediately stepped forward, his face ice-cold as he looked at Hiruzen. "Hokage sir, you must give us an explanation." Hiruzen's face turned ashen. His gaze flickered between Danzo and Wen Lan before he spoke heavily. "This matter must be thoroughly investigated." Before his words could settle, Wen Lan let out a cold laugh. Lightning exploded. His blade flashed toward Danzo's neck. "Wait!" Hiruzen shouted, reaching out to stop him. Too late. The lightning had already arrived. The blade cleaved through the air. Danzo Shimura's head flew into the sky, blood spraying like a fountain. Wen Lan stood beside the corpse, lightning coiling around him as he swept his gaze across the crowd. This is the fate of those who covet the Uchiha's possessions. No one dared to move. Hiruzen's arm remained frozen midair, his face drained of color. Wen Lan slowly lifted the blood-stained tip of his blade and pressed it against Danzo's chest, speaking coldly. "Old dog, you don't really think I only knew about the one Sharingan on you, do you? Are you not going to use Izanagi?" Confusion flickered across many faces. But in the next instant, their eyes widened in shock. Danzo's corpse, and his severed head, turned illusory, and vanished. Danzo Shimura appeared several meters away, gasping for breath. His right eye socket was empty and bleeding, yet a sinister smile crept across his face. Wen Lan clicked his tongue. "Trading one Sharingan for your life. That's a pretty good deal." The air was thick with scorched chakra residue. Only now did everyone truly understand. Izanagi was a technique that required a Sharingan, capable of rewriting reality itself, even reversing death. Which also meant, Danzo possessed more than one Sharingan. Danzo slowly extended his right hand from inside his robes. His left hand clasped his right wrist, and with a sharp pull, A gray-white eye appeared in his palm. "Evil Uchiha," he sneered, "you really do know a lot." "Enough!" Hiruzen roared. He stepped forward, stopping in front of Wenlan, took a deep breath, and said heavily, "Wenlan, I truly did not know about this matter." As he spoke, he reached out and removed the rogue ninja forehead protector from Wenlan's left shoulder. "But I am guilty of negligence. I do not acknowledge your status as a rogue ninja. The 5 ninja blades will be returned to you. From this day forward, Danzo Shimura is stripped of all positions. Root will be disbanded. He will be investigated by Konoha's judicial division and imprisoned for life. I will personally go to the Fire Daimyo's estate to plead guilty and explain everything. And I will step down as Hokage. Namikaze Minato will become the 4th Hokage. 3 seats in Konoha's High Council will be granted to the Uchiha clan." Hiruzen's voice trembled. "I ask only one thing. Please spare my old friend's life." Wenlan stared at Hiruzen's trembling hands. The lightning slowly withdrew into his blade. His voice was cold and final. "Fine. But that old dog Danzo. He must be imprisoned under the Konoha military police force. Please donate and support me." 59, Chapter 59, Danzo's Final Struggle. Killing someone is certainly satisfying, but letting an enemy live in misery is even more so. Watching him struggle in despair, every second swallowed by endless fear. What's harder than death is being alive after losing all dignity and hope. Hiruzen Sarutobi had originally wanted to place Shimura Danzo under house arrest. But under Wenlan's unwavering gaze, he simply couldn't bring himself to say it. He knew the 8 gates. Once the gate of death was opened, one would obtain power surpassing the Kage level. Yet just now, Wenlan had only opened the 6th gate, and Hiruzen hadn't even been able to react in time. He was old. His battle instincts and body had long since fallen behind. And judging from the strength Wenlan had just revealed, even if Hiruzen, Danzo, Koharu, and Homura joined forces, they might not be able to take him down. Not to mention that Wenlan possessed the terrifying feat of cutting apart a tailed beast bomb. More importantly, Danzo had already incurred public outrage. Root absorbing members from other clans had long stirred resentment. Now it was exposed that Danzo had implanted Sharingan into his own body. If this matter wasn't handled properly, Konoha would truly fall apart. "Fine." Hiruzen finally gave in, his voice low but clear. In that instant, he seemed to age several years. "Hiruzen, I won't go quietly." Danzo suddenly retreated violently, his hands forming seals at lightning speed. Wind release, vacuum wave. A sharp blade of wind tore through the air straight toward Wenlan. Using the momentum, Danzo leapt backward, a vicious glint flashing in his eyes. "You bastard," trying to run. Wenlan stomped the ground, lightning exploding around his body. Thunder breathing first form thunderclap and flash. His figure transformed into a streak of golden lightning. The incoming wind blade was instantly severed, and Wenlan's speed did not slow in the slightest as he charged straight at Danzo. Danzo hurriedly formed seals again, pulling 2 shuriken from his ninja pouch. He blew on them. The shuriken began spinning wildly, their surfaces coated in sharp wind release chakra. Wind release raisin shuriken. He flung the 2 shuriken toward Wenlan, then rapidly formed more seals. Shuriken shadow clone technique. The 2 wind-coated shuriken split, 1 into 2, 2 into 3 in the blink of an eye. Hundreds of shuriken screamed through the air toward Wenlan. "Petty tricks, daring to show off before me." Wenlan roared, lightning surging across his body. Thunder breathing 4th form distant thunder. As he charged forward, his blade slashed repeatedly like lightning. In the next instant, countless wind shuriken were shattered midair by arcs of lightning, dissolving into smoke. The original 2 shuriken broke apart into scraps of metal that clattered to the ground. Wenlan's speed did not falter. In a heartbeat, he was already before Danzo, his blade aimed straight at the man's throat. Danzo's pupils shrank sharply. His hands had just begun to form seals. ZZZRT. Danzo's right arm flew off. Blood sprayed everywhere. The severed limb was charred black at the stump, lightning still crackling faintly around it. Wenlan pressed the blade against Danzo's neck and said coldly, "If you don't kill yourself, the Shimura clan will cease to exist." Danzo's face twisted grotesquely. His left hand subconsciously reached for his chest, attempting to activate his final trump card. Wenlan immediately understood. Inner 4 symbols sealing technique. His Sharingan flared. Though Wenlan wasn't particularly skilled in genjutsu, even the most basic Uchiha illusion was far beyond what ordinary ninja could break. Danzo's eyes went blank. His movements froze abruptly as invisible chains of illusion wrapped around his consciousness. Wenlan kicked him away. Danzo crashed heavily to the ground, sliding to a stop at Uchiha Fugaku's feet. Clan head, Wenlan said coldly, he has the inner four symbols seal inside him. Seal his chakra. Fugaku's expression turned solemn. His hands formed seals rapidly as he pressed his palm to Danzo's chest. Black, tadpole-like sealing markings spread layer by layer, crawling over Danzo's entire body. The moment the others heard inner four symbols seal, their expressions changed dramatically. The range of that technique was enormous. If Danzo had really activated it just now, no one nearby would have survived. Wenlan sheathed his blade, swept his gaze across everyone present, snorted coldly, and turned to leave. The night was silent. No one tried to stop him. No one voiced an opinion. They simply dispersed. When Wenlan returned home, Yagura stood at the doorway, looking at him. It seems the Uchiha clan situation isn't very good either. It will change, Wenlan replied as he walked inside, placing his ninja blade on the table. If Sarutobi really hadn't returned your ninja blades, would you really have become a rogue ninja? No. Wenlan shook his head. I wouldn't have become a rogue ninja. I would have taken the entire Uchiha clan and left together. The pressure I applied today wasn't just to get the ninja blades back. It was to let all of Konoha clearly see the humiliation the Uchiha have endured. And to make the high-ups stop underestimating us. It was also a message. The Uchiha are not incapable of rebellion. We simply choose not to rebel. The Uchiha are no longer something you can squeeze at will. A Kaga-level powerhouse defecting from the village. As long as Sarutobi isn't an idiot, he'd never allow that. Yagura slowly nodded. But thinking of how Raza had once treated her as a sacrifice, she couldn't help but sigh. Yagura, help me brew a pot of tea, Wenlan said. A lot of people should be coming soon. All right. She went into the kitchen and quietly prepared the tea. Wenlan sat at the table with his eyes closed, fingers lightly tapping the tabletop. Sure enough, not long after, footsteps sounded outside, accompanied by suppressed breathing. Come in. The door's not locked. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried clearly through the courtyard and into the ears of those outside. The door opened. Several people entered. Uchiha Fugaku, Uchiha Mikato, Namikaze Minato, Uzumaki Kushina, Inyazuka-tsume's husband Inyazuka-tsum, and Hayaga Hayashi, Hayaga Hizashi. All eyes fell on the teacups on the table. Yagura poured the hot tea slowly, steam rising as she placed the cups down. She then stood up, about to leave. You can sit too, Wenlan said calmly as he lifted his teacup. You're not an outsider. Yagura hesitated, glanced at Fugaku and the others, then finally sat down beside Wenlan. Kid, you were too impulsive today, Inyazuka-tsum frowned. You were lucky the Hokage compromised. Otherwise, your rogue ninja status would have been sealed. Wenlan looked at him in mild surprise. He'd expected Minato or Fugaku to speak first, not Inyazuka-tsum. He was also surprised that the Hayaga clan had come personally. Ha! Wenlan chuckled softly and set down his teacup. The war just ended. Every major village is heavily damaged. But Kumagakure only lost the third Reikage. If Sarutobi lets a Kaga-level ninja defect at a time like this, do you think Kumagakure would miss the chance to attack Konoha? He looked around at everyone. And how badly the Uchiha have been suppressed. Don't tell me none of you know. Everything I did today was for the sake of the clans. Please donate and support me. 60, Chapter 60, Cooperating with Orochimaru? Minato looked at Wenlan for a long moment, then took out a sealing scroll and placed it on the table. The 5 ninja blades are inside. I'm returning them to you. Wenlan picked up the scroll, weighed it in his hand, then placed it back on the table and pushed it toward Minato. Senior Minato, consider these 5 ninja blades a congratulatory gift for you becoming Hokage. If I truly cared about their value, I wouldn't have waited until today to ask where they went. Indeed, Wenlan had never cared about the monetary value of the ninja blades. He had only wanted to use those 5 blades to stir things up. The blades could belong to the village, but they absolutely could not belong to Hiruzen Sarutobi. As long as they weren't in that old man's hands, it didn't matter who held them. Minato was slightly stunned, then broke into a relieved smile. All right. Wenlon turned to Hyaga Hayashi and Hyaga Hizashi. I didn't expect clan head Hayashi and senior Hizashi to come as well. Hayashi sat upright in Seiza, the dignity of a clan head evident in every movement. He truly resembled Fugaku in that regard. The Uchiha being sent to the Kirigakure battlefield ultimately stemmed from our clan's Byakugan. If not for that, the Uchiha would not have been dragged into so many troubles. And on the Iwagakure battlefield, you saved my brother, as well as the lives of many Hyaga clansmen. Moreover, the fact that the Uchiha dared to speak up for the Hyaga before the Hokage. That alone is something our clan will never forget. By reason and by emotion, we should come today. However, Wenlon, you are still young. Impulsiveness is understandable, but today you went too far. The third Hokage may use methods that don't stand up to scrutiny, but in the end, he has not committed a grave mistake. Do not forget the Shimura, Yudatan, and Mitokudo clans are not easy targets. Their greatest weapon is rumor and slander, killing without bloodshed. One misstep, and you may follow the path of the White Fang. Thanks for the warning, clan head Hayashi. Wenlon smiled indifferently. A sharp tongue can be a hidden blade, I understand that. But I believe even more firmly in one truth. Before absolute strength, all schemes and conspiracies are meaningless. Tell me, if I chose to wipe out those 3 clans, how long do you think it would take? The moment those words fell, everyone's expression changed dramatically. Minato immediately barked, Wenlon, that's going too far. Wenlan's expression remained calm, but his gaze was as sharp as a blade as it swept across the room. Having strength and not using it is different from having no strength and being trampled. If others don't provoke me, I won't provoke them. If they provoke me, I will strike back. If someone respects me by foot, I'll return to the yard. If someone offends me by an inch, I'll wipe out their entire family. This wasn't a threat. It was a declaration of the bottom line. Strength is the foundation of peace. Tolerance must have limits, retreat leads nowhere. History had proven it countless times. Seek unity through struggle, and unity survives. Seek unity through compromise, and unity dies. The room fell silent. After a long while, Minato finally spoke. In 4 days, Konoha and Iwagakure will sign a peace treaty at the Fire Daimyo's estate. Come with me. Minato was genuinely afraid that the moment he and Hiruzen turned their backs, Wenlon would grab his blade and annihilate the Shimura, Yudatan, and Mitokudo clans. Sure. I don't mind. With that, everyone rose and took their leave. Only Fugaku and Mikato remained seated. After everyone else had gone, Wenlon looked at Fugaku. See, opportunities are seized, not begged for through patience. As long as you show irreplaceable value, no one dares to squeeze you. Those high-level positions you've been yearning for. Hiruzen handed 3 of them to the Uchiha in one go today. A flash of realization passed through Fugaku's eyes, and he nodded heavily. At last, he understood. Power never favors the obedient. Only by wielding strength as a blade and merit as a shield could one stand firm in the bloody world of the ninja. Wenlon, Mikato said softly, I'd like Itaka to follow you and learn. Let Itaka follow me. Wenlon was momentarily surprised, then thought it over and nodded. All right. No problem. Attend tomorrow night's clan meeting, Fugaku said as he stood up. I'll formally announce you as the 3rd elder. After saying that, he left. Mikato looked at Wenlon, her eyes filled with anticipation and unease. I hope you can teach him what true strength really is. Wenlon smiled. Don't worry, Aunt Mikato. After they left, Wenlon sat alone, deep in thought. To be honest, Minato and Kushina had always treated him well. In the past, he lacked the strength to help them. But now, with Kage-level power and the 8 gates, it wasn't impossible for him to clash head-on with the 9 tails. He might even win. Still, there were uncertainties. Obito's Kamui was troublesome beyond measure. That space-time ability, shifting between intangibility and reality at will, was perfect for assassination. If Kushina were giving birth to Naruto and Obito used Kamui to break the seal directly, Kushina wouldn't be able to hold on. Wenlon glanced at his palm, narrowing his eyes. Looks like I need to have a talk with Orochimaru. He stood up, intending to go rest, only to notice Yagura still nearby. You haven't left yet. Yagura stared at him blankly. You never told me to leave. Wenlon burst out laughing. Go rest already. Oh. Yagura stood up and headed to her room. The night passed quietly. Early the next morning, Wenlan first went to the Konoha police force prison. The police force was under Uchiha control, and the prison stood near the Uchiha district. It housed only the most vicious criminals. Spies captured infiltrating the village were often placed here after interrogation, awaiting further judgment. 2 Uchiha Jonin stood guard at the entrance. Upon seeing Wenlan, they saluted respectfully. Wenlan put his hands in his pockets and asked casually, "That old dog Danzo, is he inside?" One of the Jonin grinned. "Don't worry, Lord Wenlan. The brothers gave that old dog a warm welcome last night. He should be sleeping soundly right about now." At dusk the previous day, many Uchiha had rushed to the Hokage Tower. When Danzo's illegal sharing and implants were exposed on the spot, the Uchiha nearly went berserk. If not for Fugaku ordering his arrest, Danzo would have been torn to pieces. "I won't go in," Wenlan said. "You two stay alert. Root may be disbanded, but Danzo still has die-hard loyalists. A jailbreak is possible. Torture him if you like, but don't kill him. Let him live every day and night in fear. Only then will it repay the suffering the Uchiha endured all these years." "Understood." Wenlan nodded and left. He walked through the morning streets, dew dampening the tips of his shoes. Shopkeepers were opening for the day, smoke rising from cooking fires, and the smell of grilled fish drifted through the air. Before long, he spotted a figure strolling toward the Hokage Tower. Orochimaru. Orochimaru sensed someone watching him and turned his head. When he saw Wenlan, he paused in surprise. Wenlan walked over with a smile. "Orochimaru sir. Interested in having a talk about immortality. Please donate and support me." 61, Chapter 61, Cooperation Confirmed. Orochimaru's golden, slit-like pupils contracted slightly as he stared at the boy before him. Immortality. That word was not empty rhetoric to him. It was an obsession born from witnessing the fragility of life, carved deep into his soul after endless deaths on the battlefield. Especially after his student, Naoki Senju, perished in the war, Orochimaru's fixation only intensified. From that moment on, he became desperate to transcend mortality itself, to shatter the limits of life through science and forbidden techniques. Yet ironically, he had never truly begun. Because just last night, Danzo Shimura, the man who had only recently spoken to him about Hashirama cells, had been crushed outright by Wenlan. Orochimaru's fingers twitched unconsciously. He quickly steadied himself and curved his lips into a faint smile. "Mr. Wenlan," he said softly, "what exactly are you planning to discuss with me? Why not talk about it at your place?" Wenlan replied calmly, "More than welcome." Orochimaru led Wenlan back to his residence. Wenlan had expected something more befitting one of the legendary Sannin, at the very least, a spacious courtyard. After all, even if the title Sannin was something of an insult to the three of them, their status was unquestionable. Instead, what greeted him was a cramped, ordinary room, no different from a civilian's dwelling. The furnishings were plain, and the space felt even smaller due to the clutter of experimental equipment scattered about. "Orochimaru sir is surprisingly frugal," Wenlan remarked, his gaze sweeping over the test tubes and scrolls piled in the corners. Orochimaru chuckled lightly. "It's just a place to live. There's no need for extravagance." He poured Wenlan a cup of water straight from the tap. No tea, no heating, just tap water. Wenlan felt momentarily speechless. Expecting Orochimaru to serve tea might indeed have been too much, but pouring unboiled water directly from the pipe was something else entirely. "Now then," Orochimaru said with interest, "what thoughts do you have regarding immortality? Please take a good look, Orochimaru sir." The moment the words fell, Wenlan drew his blade. Before Orochimaru could even react, slash! Wenlan severed his own neck. Blood sprayed instantly. His head fell neatly into his hands, warm blood splashing across Orochimaru's face. Orochimaru's pupils shrank violently. The severed head opened its eyes in Wenlan's palms, lips curling into a calm smile. "See," the head said evenly, "this is my path to immortality." He calmly placed the head back onto his neck. Flesh writhed. Muscle, blood vessels, and bone knitted together like living vines. In the blink of an eye, the wound sealed completely, leaving behind smooth, unblemished skin, no scar, no trace of injury. Orochimaru couldn't stop himself. He reached out and touched Wenlan's neck. Warm, real, alive. There was no residual chakra fluctuation at all. His fingers trembled as ecstasy and greed flashed through his eyes. "How did you do this?" Orochimaru demanded. This, Wenlan said with a faint smile, is precisely why I want to cooperate with you. My ability is called Demon. If I so choose, by granting someone my blood, they can obtain an immortal body, true immortality. Even fatal injuries regenerate instantly. Severed limbs regrow as if it were nothing. Orochimaru's body began to tremble with excitement, but he quickly forced himself to calm down. With such incredible power, he said slowly, there must be unresolved problems. Otherwise, you wouldn't need me. Wenlan nodded. Correct. Those who receive my blood cannot be exposed to ultraviolet light, they cannot endure sunlight. They also develop an extreme craving for human flesh. If they don't consume it, their bodies weaken rapidly. I want to work with you to eliminate these side effects. As my power grows, the blood I grant will also bestow greater strength, and unique techniques I call blood demon arts. If you can help me solve these flaws, when Lan's eyes sharpen, I will give you the most perfect blood, granting you true, eternal life. Orochimaru's pupils contracted violently. His nails dug into his palms as he suppressed a near-hysterical breath. You're dangling immortality in front of me, he said hoarsely, letting out a low laugh, knowing full well I'm a madman obsessed with forbidden arts. But you've convinced me. I will use every method available to dissect the essence of your demons. Wenlan smiled faintly. There was one thing he hadn't mentioned, the problem of the soul. He was indeed immortal. Genjutsu barely affected him thanks to the Sharingan. Sealing techniques were troublesome, but not insurmountable. The soul, however, was a far more dangerous weakness. Fortunately, in the shinobi world, very few could directly attack the soul. But there's one more issue, Orochimaru added casually. Research requires materials. I know, Wenlan replied without hesitation. The Konoha Military Police Detention Facility has plenty of death row prisoners. Orochimaru laughed softly. Then what do I owe you in return? I want you to stand firmly on the side of the Uchiha, and to fully support Minato Namikaze's faction. Orochimaru raised a brow. Since Nawaka's death, his obsession with the Hokage position had long faded, replaced entirely by the pursuit of immortality. That's all? He asked skeptically. Yes, that's all. Oh, and one more thing, Wenlan added lightly. Finish the research within a year. Rest assured, Orochimaru licked his lips. The sooner I solve these problems, the sooner I can conquer eternity. Wenlan left behind a vial of blood and departed. He strolled through Konoha's streets at an unhurried pace. Wenlan. A girl's voice called out. Turning his head, he saw Inyazuka Hana jogging toward him with a bright smile. You're not training today? She asked cheerfully. Wenlan shrugged. Senior Due hasn't recovered yet, and Guy thinks my training speed is too slow, so I'll wait until Due Master is fully healed. Indeed, Wenlan's shadow-level strength relied on opening the 8 gates. Pure physical training-wise, he was still inferior to Might Guy. His body could regenerate, but the fundamentals weren't there yet. 7 gates was his current limit. The 8th gate was still impossible. Then come shopping with me. Hana said happily. Sure. Wenlan smiled, taking her hand as they walked together down the street, morning sunlight stretching their shadows long across the stone road. Suddenly, brat, you still dare to steal? I'll beat you to death. The angry shout drew their attention. Looking over, they saw a butcher wielding a stick, striking at 2 small children huddled on the ground. Please donate and support me. 62, Chapter 62, Cultivating Deathsworn. The 2 children, one boy and one girl, looked no more than 3 or 4 years old. They wore clothes covered in patches, their thin bodies frail and undernourished, yet surprisingly clean. At this moment, the boy was tightly hugging the girl in his arms, while the girl clutched a chunk of meat against her chest with all her strength. The butcher shouted fiercely, but the stick landing on the boy's back was clearly restrained, painful enough to scare, but far from injuring him. That's enough. Wenlan couldn't help stepping forward. He pulled some money from his ninja pouch and said, Boss, how much is it? I'll pay for them. The butcher froze for a moment, then glared at the 2 children and roared. Get lost. If I see you again, I'll beat you to death. Terrified, the 2 children scrambled to their feet, bowed deeply to Wenlan, and ran off as fast as they could. Inyazuka Hana immediately stormed over, furious. How can you be like that? Wenlan already said he'd pay for them, why are you still yelling at them? Hana. Wenlan quickly barked in a low voice. He could tell the butcher had done it on purpose. Hannah puffed up her cheeks, clearly unhappy, and folded her arms, turning away. The butcher didn't get angry. He put away the stick and sighed. "Those 2 kids are from the orphanage. I'd like to help them, but I've only got so much ability myself. A little meat stolen is one thing, but if it becomes a habit, how am I supposed to keep my business running? They need to know that stealing is wrong, but I can't really hurt them either. That's the only way I've got." He waved his hand. "As for the money, Ninja sir, there's no need to pay." Hannah froze, then immediately bowed deeply, her face full of guilt. "I'm sorry. I didn't know." "It's fine," the butcher said gently. "Those who don't know aren't at fault." He looked toward the direction the children had fled and murmured, "I just hope they can survive." Wenlon thought for a moment, then asked, "Boss, how much for all the meat in your shop?" "I'll buy everything." "Huh." The butcher was stunned. "There's quite a lot of meat here." "It's fine. Just name a price." Seeing such a big deal, the butcher hurriedly weighed everything. After Wenlon paid, he asked, "Can you deliver it?" "Of course." "Then take it to the orphanage," Wenlon said, grabbing Hannah's hand. "Perfect timing, you can show me the way." The butcher was dumbfounded for a moment, then broke into a wide grin. "Wenlon sir really is a kind man. I'll thank you on behalf of the orphanage children. I'll load it up right now." Wenlon wasn't surprised that the butcher recognized him. At this point, it would be strange if someone in Konoha didn't know who he was. The butcher quickly wheeled out a handcart, stacking slabs of meat neatly into a small mountain, sweat dripping from his brow as he worked. Hannah looked puzzled and asked quietly, "Wenlon, the orphanage receives funding from the village. Why buy so much meat?" Wenlon smiled wryly. Children from wealthy families rarely understood real hardship. "Yes, the village does allocate funds," he said calmly, "but when you're facing a large group of orphans, it's just a drop in the bucket. If they could really eat their fill, why would they steal meat in the first place?" Hannah nodded slowly in realization. When someone steals money, it's that person's fault. When someone steals food, it's society's fault. "There's more to it," Wenlon continued, hands in his pockets as he looked toward the orphanage. "Kind villagers lose only a little money, but they'll remember it for life. A drop of kindness is repaid with a spring, and when the spring runs dry, it becomes a fountain. When these orphans grow up, they'll remember today. If they can't repay the favor with money, repaying it with themselves is still an option." He smiled faintly. "You never know, someone you save by chance today might become an extraordinary figure tomorrow." Hannah stared at him, stunned. For some reason, 2 words surfaced in her mind. Deathsworn. Her heart trembled, as if she had glimpsed both Wenlan's deep strategy and his compassion. The butcher pushed the cart over and said cheerfully, "Wenlon sir, everything's loaded." Wenlon looked at the mountain of meat, nodded in satisfaction, and patted the cart. "Let's go. What we're delivering isn't just food, it's hope." The orphanage was located in a remote corner of the village, consisting of only a few buildings. Children were curled up in the yard, basking in the sunlight. Their clothes were ragged but clean, and their eyes were bright. The boy who had stolen the meat sat at the entrance, repeatedly glancing inside. Inside, a woman carefully spoon-fed meat broth to a pale little girl lying in bed. She had blonde hair, round black-framed glasses, and wore clothes resembling a nun's habit. "Be big brother." The little girl who had stolen the meat tugged nervously on the boy's clothes, pointing fearfully at the butcher outside. The boy's face went pale. He immediately stood up, shielding his sister behind him, his body tense as he stared at the gate. Standing outside the iron gate, Wenlon called out, "Could someone open the door? We're here to deliver meat." When the boy recognized Wenlan's face, his tense body instantly relaxed. He remembered the man who had helped them earlier. 3 women and 2 men working inside the orphanage looked over in confusion. One of the men froze, then his face lit up with joy. He hurried over, opened the gate, and bowed deeply. "Wenlon sir. I'm Ransuk." Wenlon looked at him carefully, feeling he seemed familiar. You saved my life on the front lines." Ransuk said quickly. 3 Awega Kurnin had me cornered." Wenlon thought back for a moment, then suddenly remembered. "Ah, it's you. What are you doing at the orphanage?" Ransuk scratched his head sheepishly. "My injuries were severe. I had to leave the ninja profession, so I came here to work." "As long as you're alive, that's what matters," Wenlon nodded. These are some meat I bought, just to help the kids eat better. Ronsuk's eyes turned red as he bowed again and again. Thank you so much, Wenlan sir. The village funds barely keep them from starving, having a full meal is almost impossible. I thank you on behalf of all the children. Wenlan waved it off. I'm part of the village too. Helping is the only right. He gestured for the butcher to unload the meat into the kitchen. Nearby, the children's eyes lit up the instant they saw the meat. They gathered around instinctively, yet none dared approach. Even as saliva dripped from their mouths, they stayed frozen in place. Only when Ronsuk smiled and called them over did they cautiously step forward. Please donate and support me. 63, Chapter 63, Yakushi no no. Inyazuka Hana looked at the children, some no younger than herself, some only a little older, and yet there was not the slightest trace of what a childhood should look like in their eyes. Wenlan took down a large bag of candy from the handcart beside him. He had bought it casually on the way. Handing it to a boy who looked around 10 or so, he said, "Go distribute these." The boy immediately bowed deeply to Wenlan. "Thank you, Wenlan sir." Then he hurried off to hand out the sweets. Hana watched the skinny, frail children with a pained expression and asked Ronsuk beside her, "Why don't these children go to the ninja academy?" Wenlan's face immediately twisted in visible discomfort as he looked at her, as if she had just said something extremely naive, almost laughably so. This question was no different from, "Why don't they just eat meat?" Ronsuk was also stumped, unsure how to answer. Wenlan sighed and said quietly, "Becoming a ninja requires both talent and resources. Even though civilians can barely manage the resources, these children are orphans, they have no backing. And the reason they're still here is simple, they don't have any ninja talent at all." There was one thing Wenlan didn't say out loud, any child with real talent had likely already been taken by Danzo into root. These children struggle just to eat their fill. How could they even think about chakra control or ninjutsu training? That they were still alive at all was already a miracle, their lives were like candles flickering in the wind. At that moment, the woman who had been feeding the sick little girl meat soup earlier walked over. She bowed with a gentle smile. "Greetings, Wenlan sir. I am the director of this orphanage, Yakushi no no. Thank you for your support." Wenlan froze slightly when he heard the name, then carefully examined the woman before him. Yakushi no no, a former member of Root. She had left Root because she could not accept Danzo's ruthless philosophy. Later, Danzo used the orphanage's funding as leverage, forcing her to act as a spy in other countries. In the end, she died by the hand of Yakushi Kabuto. And right now, Kabuto should still be one of the children here. Wenlan's gaze shifted subtly as he looked at this woman who still retained her kindness. A ripple stirred in his heart. It was nothing more than a small gesture. Wenlan replied softly. "Please come inside," Yakushi no no said, stepping aside and gesturing politely. "Allow the orphanage to show a bit of hospitality." Wenlan did not refuse and entered with Hana. The orphanage building wasn't large, but it was exceptionally clean and tidy. Childish drawings covered the walls, crude, colorful, and full of fragile hope. A faint medicinal scent lingered in the air. Several neatly labeled medicine bottles sat on a cabinet in the corner, evidence that the director often treated the children's ailments herself. Wenlan quietly surveyed the room, his gaze settling on Yakushi no no's gentle yet exhausted face. This was a woman who knew how dangerous the road ahead was, yet still chose to guard this sliver of light. Ronsuk brought over 3 cups of hot water and a plate of roughly baked snacks. "Sorry for the poor hospitality," Nono said apologetically. "This is already very good," Wenlan replied with a smile. Hana noticed several children standing timidly at the doorway, peeking inside. Their eyes were fixed on the snacks, saliva unconsciously dripping. She waved them over. The children hesitated, glancing at Yakushi no no. Only after she nodded did they dare to shuffle inside. Hana handed out the snacks, and the children immediately burst into delighted cheers. They called her big sister over and over again, their voices melting Hana's heart. Tears shimmered at the corners of her eyes. Wenlan watched quietly, the warmth of the cup in his hand spreading into his chest. "They haven't laughed like this in a long time," Yakushi no no said softly. Looking at the children carefully biting into their snacks as if afraid they might disappear, Wenlan sighed. "When the 4th Hokage takes office, I'll explain the orphanage's situation to him." Yakushi no no naturally knew who Wenlan was, and knew he had the influence to make that happen. She nodded gently. "Thank you, Wenlan sir." Wenlan took a sip of water and said calmly, I don't know if you're aware, but Danzo has already been suppressed by me. He's imprisoned in the police force's prison. Nono's pupils contracted slightly, but her excellent spy training allowed her to regain composure almost instantly. To an untrained eye, nothing seemed amiss. Before she could speak, Wenlan continued, that old bastard Danzo won't be leaving prison alive. You're completely free from Root now. This time, Nono's pupils shrank sharply. Her hand trembled involuntarily as she stared at Wenlan in disbelief. Root members always operated with masks, just like ANBU. Even longtime collaborators often didn't know each other's identities. And she had left Root long ago. Yet Wenlan had exposed her identity in a single sentence. Her fingers curled slightly. After swallowing hard, she finally said in a low voice, "Thank you, Wenlan sir." "There's no need for that," Wenlan replied calmly. "Just take good care of the children from now on." His gaze then drifted toward the courtyard window, to a gray-haired boy sitting quietly on a swing. That boy was someone who would one day play a pivotal role in the Fourth Shinobi World War. Yakushi Kabuto. Soon, the aroma of cooked meat drifted through the orphanage. Every child instinctively swallowed and looked toward the cafeteria. Wenlan stood up and said gently, "We should be going. That meat should last the children about 2 months. If there's ever a problem, you can come find me at the Uchiha compound." Hana added quickly, "You can also come to the Inyazuka clan. I'd be happy to help too." "On behalf of the children, thank you both," Nono said, bowing deeply. After leaving the orphanage, Hana couldn't help but glance back at the rundown buildings. "I never imagined the village still had places like this." "The brilliance of a village always casts shadows somewhere," Wenlan replied softly, his words sharp as carved steel. "What we need to do is change that." That evening, back at the Uchiha compound, Wenlan shamelessly stayed for dinner at Fugaku's house. Soon after, it was time for the clan meeting. Fugaku, Wenlan, and Itake walked side by side into the ancestral hall. Candlelight flickered, illuminating portraits of past clan heads. Unfortunately, Uchiha Madara was not among them. By the time they arrived, everyone else was already seated on cushions, their expressions solemn. Wenlan stepped forward to his designated seat, the seat of the third elder. Fugaku stood and addressed the hall. "Today's clan meeting concerns 2 matters. First, Uchiha Wenlan has already reached Kage-level strength and possesses the 3-tomo Sharingan. I propose promoting him to the position of third elder. Any objections?" "I agree," the first elder said immediately. "I agree as well." The remaining elders followed suit without hesitation. With that, Uchiha Wenlan was officially appointed as the third elder of the Uchiha clan. Please donate and support me. 64, Chapter 64, But this life of mine never belonged to me. The second matter, 2 days from now is the day Konoha and Uegakur sign the peace treaty. There will be a joint escort, 10 ANBU, 3 members of the Hyuga clan, and 3 members of the Uchiha clan. Among the Uchiha, the third elder, Uchiha Wenlan, will lead the team. There are 2 remaining slots. Who is willing to go? For a moment, everyone exchanged glances. They all knew this was a thankless assignment. It wasn't being issued as a formal mission, which meant no pay. And if anything went wrong during the escort, minor injuries would be the least of it. Death was a real possibility. Worst of all, the village would offer no compensation. Clan head, "I'll go." Uchiha Shursui, kneeling upright, spoke calmly. "Good." Fugaku nodded in satisfaction. Shursui was strong, and his presence would show that the Uchiha were taking this matter seriously, no slight toward Minato. "That leaves 1 more slot." "Father, I'll go as well." A calm yet resolute voice rang out. It was Uchiha Itake. Fugaku's gaze sharpened as it landed on Itake, who was barely 4 years old. "You're not going." Wenlan shot Itake a sideways glance. "You're the future clan head. There's no need for you to personally handle something like this. And frankly, your current strength doesn't qualify you to go." The peace treaty might look safe, but in truth it was riddled with danger. If negotiations collapsed, it would immediately turn into open conflict. The reason the talks were being held in the Land of Fire was simple. Konoha had gained a slight upper hand against Uegakur and thus held the initiative. But initiative did not equal safety. Uegakur's ninja could easily seek revenge in the shadows. "Clan head, third elder, let me go." An Uchiha Jonin stood up. It was Uchiha Nein. He had been gravely injured in the battle against the 7 ninja swordsmen and had only recently fully recovered. He bowed deeply to Wenlan. On the battlefield, the third elder saved my life. I'll repay that debt for the rest of my life. If anyone means you harm, they'll have to step over my corpse first. Wenlan frowned slightly and looked at him. Master Nayan, I saved you because we're of the same clan, not because I wanted repayment. As an Uchiha, your loyalty should be to the clan as a whole, not to a single individual. The words were impeccably proper, but they still drew everyone's attention to Wenlan. Fugaku's face darkened slightly. That line was clearly aimed at him. Nayan scratched his head awkwardly. Third elder, you really don't need to call me master anymore. And in my eyes, you saved my life, no matter how you look at it, this life of mine belongs to you now. Wenlan sighed, his gaze sweeping across the hall before settling back on Nayan. Since you insist, then come along. But this mission prioritizes stability above all else. Everything will be done according to my orders. His voice dropped a notch. We represent the face of the Uchiha, and the authority of Konoha itself. Not even a blade of grass may be damaged. Yes. Nayan and Shursui answered in unison, back straight as spears. Good. Then it's settled. Fugaku nodded. He was about to adjourn the meeting when Wenlan signaled that he still had something to say. Fugaku paused. Third elder, you have more to add. Wenlan took the floor smoothly, addressing everyone. I have 2 points. First, although Root has been dissolved, Shinmura Danzo's influence has not been fully eradicated. During the peace talks, it's very possible his loyalists will attempt a prison break. Security around the prison must be strengthened, especially at night. 2 rotating shifts of Uchiha personnel are mandatory. Second, in the near future, Orochimaru may visit Konoha's prison to inspect high-value inmates. If he takes any prisoners with him, do not interfere. Let him take them. Yes, third elder. The room responded in unison. Fugaku and the other elders exchanged looks. From Wenlan's words, it was obvious he had reached some kind of agreement with Orochimaru. But since Wenlan didn't elaborate, they didn't press the matter. After all, Wenlan had already proven wisdom far beyond his age. The meeting ended, and everyone departed. Wenlan returned to his own courtyard. The moment he saw Yagura playing with water again, he felt a headache coming on. At this rate, the fish in his pond were doomed. Sensing his return, Yagura shook the water off her hands and stood up. I saved you some food. I'll heat it up for you. Wenlan was briefly surprised, then realized he hadn't told her he ate at Fugaku's place. No need. I already ate at the clan head's house, he said, stopping her. In the future, if I'm not back, eat when you want and sleep when you want. You don't need to wait for me. Yagura had always placed herself very low. She knew she was alive only because of Wenlan. A 5-year-old with Kage-level power, his future was limitless. She understood that Wenlan was her pillar of support, and so she unconsciously treated herself like a servant. You're already a member of Konoha, Wenlan said as he walked inside. You're a normal person. There's no need to demean yourself. Yagura stood where she was, water still dripping from her fingers, watching his back. After a long moment, she whispered softly. But this life of mine, never truly belonged to me in the first place. The night wind brushed past, ruffling the loose strands of hair on her forehead, yet unable to shake the stubborn resolve in her eyes. She crouched back down by the pond, gazing at the moon's reflection in the water. It looked just like that night in the desert, when Tsunagakur betrayed her, the same cold, lonely silver glow. But this moon was no longer the moon of that night. Over the next 2 days, Wenlan bought more supplies for Might Due. After all, Due was practically his teacher. Without him, even with the demon power, Wenlan would never have reached his current level. At present, Wenlan's base strength was at most Jonin level, but once he opened the 8 gates, he could reach Superkage territory. Every day, Wenlan continued swinging his blade, diligently completing the training requirements for Breath of Thunder. Because of the war, he hadn't trained like this in a long time. Finally, at dawn on the 4th day, the group assembled at the village gates. At the front stood Hiruzen Sarutobi, wearing the Hokage robes and hat. Behind him were Mitokado Homura, Yuditen Koharu, Namikaze Minato, and several ANBU. Further back stood Hyaga Hisashi and 2 other Hyaga members, along with Wenlan, Nayan, and Shursui. One of the ANBU caught Wenlan's attention. The man wasn't much taller than Wenlan himself, and that white hair was unmistakable. Kakashi. This was the first time Wenlan had seen the famous 50-50 Kakashi since arriving in this world. After all, Kakashi wasn't most famous for his Sharingan or his background, but for always arriving late, yet somehow surviving every crisis with a perfect 5-5 split. People said the Sharingan dragged Kakashi down. And yet, it never stopped him from carving a few extra dog heads onto the memorial wall. Please support me. 65, Chapter 65, Conflict. Seeing that everyone had arrived, Hiruzen Sarutobi spoke calmly. Set off. In the next instant, everyone vanished into streaks of afterimages, sprinting out of Konoha at high speed. Ride in carriages? Forget it. Everyone was busy. The sooner the peace talks concluded, the better. As long as the treaty wasn't signed, war could break out on the front lines at any moment. The distance from Konoha to Daimyo's capital was not short. Even at full speed, it would take 2 full days. That night, the ANBU set up tents and distributed rations, resting on the spot. The night was pitch black. Bonfires swayed in the wind, illuminating faces filled with exhaustion and vigilance. They took turns keeping watch through the night. Aside from Kakashi, the rest were divided into 3 squads. Each squad consisted of 3 ANBU, 1 Hyaga, and 1 Uchiha, rotating guard duty. Fortunately, the journey remained uneventful. By the evening of the second day, they finally arrived at Daimyo's capital. Towering city walls rose before them, light stretching endlessly through the night. Security was tight, but once it was confirmed they were Konoha's delegation, they were swiftly allowed through. Passing through the gates, lanterns lined the streets like a fallen river of stars. Merchants were still calling out, the city lively and bustling. This place was essentially the ancient equivalent of an imperial capital. In the distance stood the towering structure of the daimyo's palace. The group followed the stone-paved road until they reached the envoy hostel, where a reception official was already waiting. Hokage sir, welcome to the capital of the land of fire. Hiruzen nodded lightly. Have the Earth Daimyo and the Tsuchikage arrived? Not yet. According to the escort's report, they should arrive around noon tomorrow. Rooms have already been prepared for you, please forgive any shortcomings. As they were led inside, Wenlan leaned toward Minato and whispered, Master Minato, shouldn't we be paying our respects to the daimyo first? Based on Wenlan's memories of ancient diplomacy, envoys usually met the emperor upon arrival. Minato's expression turned, strange. Our daimyo. He hesitated, then sighed. You'll understand when you see him tomorrow. Wenlan was confused, but noticed the helplessness and complexity in Minato's eyes. As for daimyos, Wenlan felt nothing but disdain. The relationship between a daimyo and a ninja village was like that of a president and the military. Nominally, the daimyo ruled the land, but in reality, the ninja villages operated independently. Daimyo's authority was symbolic at best. The true power shaping the era belonged to those who commanded tailed beasts and ninjutsu, the kage. And yet, these kage still bowed their heads, maintaining surface-level obedience and ritual. Why? Because the daimyos controlled the funding. If it were Wenlan, he'd simply send ninja to seize the palace. Instead of being shackled by budgets, why not cut the chains entirely? Kill you, and the money becomes mine anyway. Hadn't he heard that saying? Raise armies, yes. Reduce feudal lords, no. Uphold heaven and purge treason, go. Father is come, brother is go, double kill. With power like that, how could anyone still control him? But Wenlan wasn't the supreme leader, so he didn't bother worrying about such things. After settling in, he fell asleep almost instantly. By noon the next day, the long-awaited guests finally arrived. Hiruzen and the others were already seated in the council chamber. A long rectangular table stood at the center. On one side sat Hiruzen Sarutobi, Mitokado Homura, and Yuditen Koharu. Opposite them were empty seats reserved for the Earth Daimyo and the Tsuchikage. Wenlan and the rest stood in a line against the wall, serving as guards. Soon, Onaki and the Earth Daimyo entered, accompanied by 20 ANBU-like escorts. It was, oddly amusing. Onaki, short and elderly, with sparse white hair, radiated authority. His small body floated in midair, but he made sure not to rise higher than the Earth Daimyo's head, which somehow made it even funnier. Seeing Hiruzen, Onaki snorted coldly. Truth be told, he refused to accept the outcome of this war, but he had no choice. Iwagakure had nearly been bled dry. If the war continued, even children in diapers would have been forced onto the battlefield. not to mention the appearance of someone who could slice apart a tailed beast bomb. Onaki had no choice but to attend. "Old bastard, how are you still alive?" His opening remark was vicious. Wenlon froze for a moment, then mentally gave Onaki a thumbs up. Nice insult. This old man had a sharp tongue and didn't hold back. Hiruzen removed his pipe, smiling faintly. "If you're still alive, how could I possibly be dead?" A perfect counter. Humph. Onaki snorted and said no more. The Earth Daimyo, clad in luxurious robes, entered with an air of arrogance. His gaze swept across the room, filled with a sense of innate superiority. Though he wielded no real power, he still saw himself as ruler of the land of Earth, barely even acknowledging the Kage. To him, ninja were nothing more than retainers. When Wenlon saw the Earth Daimyo, his expression was full of contempt. Arms crossed, he didn't stand straight like the other guards. Onaki and the daimyo noticed immediately. The Earth Daimyo frowned in displeasure. Onaki, however, spoke first. "This must be that so-called 5-year-old Kage-level ninja. Uchiha Wenlon, known as Golden Thunder Flame, correct?" Wenlon smiled lightly, neither humble nor arrogant. "That would be me." Onaki sneered. "Kirigakur has truly fallen. To be beaten into hiding by a brat like you, how fitting for a village whose tailed beast is nothing but a turtle." Minato's expression changed slightly. He knew Wenlon far too well. Vindictive. Never let things slide. Onaki's words were clearly meant to belittle Wenlon's reputation. Minato wanted to stop it, but it was already too late. "I didn't expect the mighty Tsuchikage to be such a tiny little old man," Wenlon replied casually. "That big, sturdy fellow behind you, that's your son, Kitsuke, right? Did you ever wonder how someone as short as you could give birth to a son that tall? Or was it your neighbor who helped you out?" The entire room twitched violently. This wasn't just slapping Onaki's face, it was pulling down his pants and taking a dump on his head. Onaki shook with rage. His face went from red to green, beard and hair bristling. 70 years old, being humiliated by a child like this, anyone would explode. "You little bastard, courting death." Onaki's massive chakra erupted instantly. "Oh, you want to fight, old man?" Wenlon sneered. 8 gates, 6th gate, gate of view, open. 2 overwhelming waves of chakra collided head-on. The Earth Daimyo turned deathly pale, staggering backward several steps. No one had expected the conflict to escalate this fast. Wenlon stared coldly at Onaki. "There's a saying, old man, an old thief who refuses to die is still a thief. Back when you stood before Uchiha Madara, you were shaking in fear. And now you're trying to reclaim your dignity by bullying the younger generation. Please donate and support me." 66, Chapter 66, Minato argues his case. Looking for death. Onaki formed seals at lightning speed, hands clapping together before spreading apart. A white, cube-shaped construct instantly appeared in his palms. Dust release, atomic dismantling technique. Wenlon drew his ninja blade in a single motion. Golden lightning exploded along the blade, thunder coiling like a dragon around the edge as blinding light tore through the air. "Enough." Hiruzen Sarutobi abruptly stood and barked, "Onaki. We are here for peace talks, do you want the war to continue?" Onaki glared at Hiruzen, veins bulging at his temples. The dust release hummed violently in his palm, as if it would be unleashed at any second. "Sure," Wenlon said flatly. "Just my Uchiha clan alone has over 60 jonin left. How many jonin do Uegakur still have? If you think the fighting wasn't intense enough, how about we start a tailed beast war right now?" That single sentence made both Onaki's and Hiruzen's expressions change. Everyone present knew what it meant if the tailed beasts were deployed. The ninja world would plunge into an unprecedented catastrophe. Onaki knew even better. The Sharingan was an absolute deterrent to tailed beasts. Uchiha Madara controlling the 9 tails was a lesson carved into the blood-soaked history of the ninja world. And when this child could split a tailed beast bomb, Onaki couldn't afford that gamble. The air solidified like iron. Onaki's palm trembled as the glow of dust release shrank back into nothingness. Hiruzen took a deep breath and slowly sat down, his voice low but carrying unquestionable authority. Today's discussion is not to ignite new flames of war, but to find a path of survival for the ninja world. Wenlon let out a cold laugh. His blade tip lowered, golden lightning fading back into the steel, yet his gaze never left Onaki. "If war comes, the Uchiha will answer it to the end, but can you afford the price?" Onaki slowly withdrew his hands. The dust release dissipated, cold sweat sliding down his forehead. He stared fixedly at Wenlan's sharingan, swallowed hard, and finally said nothing. The council chamber fell into deathly silence, broken only by the wind whispering through the hall. Hiruzen closed his eyes briefly, then spoke softly. The peace talks continue, but all sides must exercise restraint. Wenlan sheathed his blade and swept his gaze across the room, voice icy. Restraint requires mutual fear. Never forget, within Uchiha eyes, ash has never inspired terror. Oh my, what's all this commotion? A shrill, rooster-like voice rang out as the fire daimyo walked in, waving a folding fan. Wenlan looked at him oddly. The fire daimyo's complexion was pale and sickly, his body clearly hollowed out by wine and indulgence. Yet that voice, it really didn't match his appearance. The daimyo entered with several aides, seated himself at the head, and snapped his fan shut. Since everyone's here, he said, displeasure evident beneath his tone, let's talk properly. Wenlan instantly understood why they hadn't visited the daimyo the day before. If a war produced a losing nation, the defeated side would pay enormous reparations. Even for a daimyo, that was a tempting sum. But now there was a peace treaty instead, and Konoha held the advantage. Naturally, the fire daimyo was unwilling to settle. However, Konoha's core forces were depleted, leaving him no choice but to agree. That didn't mean he held no resentment toward Hiruzen. The remaining process was straightforward. The treaty terms were read aloud clause by clause. Within 3 days, Iwagakure would release all captured prisoners. Once the signing was complete, the Earth Daimyo and Onaki departed. As he left, Onaki shot Wenlan a venomous glare. After the Earth delegation had fully withdrawn, the Fire Daimyo fanned himself and looked at Hiruzen. Anything else? Hiruzen bowed respectfully. Daimyo sir, I intend to step down as Hokage and recommend Namikaze Minato as the 4th Hokage. Minato has rendered outstanding service in this war, and his reputation within the village is extremely high. Daimyo paused, eyes narrowing as he studied Hiruzen. After a long moment, he chuckled. You're eager to hand over power at a time like this. He rose slowly, sweeping his gaze across the room. But Minato is young. Can he suppress the old guard? Are you sure you want to retire now? Wenlan watched coldly, understanding immediately. The daimyo did not want Konoha to produce another Hokage with overwhelming prestige. Hiruzen's expression didn't change. Precisely because he is young, he has the potential to lead the village into a new era. The daimyo snorted, tapping the ribs of his fan, eyes sharp as needles. A new era? Konoha's foundation cannot afford the slightest shake. After a brief silence, he finally nodded. Very well. The fan opened again, a breeze brushing his pallid face. But Konoha's funding will be cut in half for the next 3 years. That single line made everyone's expression change. Cutting funding was a direct restraint on Konoha's strength, a political check meant to weaken Hokage authority and prevent excessive concentration of power. Wenlan frowned slightly. Konoha had just emerged from war. Compensation for fallen ninja hadn't been fully paid, and wounded soldiers urgently needed treatment. Reducing funds now was adding frost to snow. Hiruzen's expression shifted subtly. He lowered his head, about to accept. But Minato suddenly spoke. Daimyo sir, post-war compensation and medical treatment require funds. If the budget is halved, morale will collapse. The room jolted. Daimyo's gaze turned ice cold. Wenlan, however, looked at Minato with clear approval. This was what a Hokage should do to protect the village's interests, and argue when compromise was unacceptable. Daimyo sneered, snapping his fan shut. And who do you think you are, to speak out of turn here? The air froze. Minato didn't retreat an inch, his eyes steady. I am Namikaze Minato. Oh, so it's you, the daimyo sneered. Don't forget, whether you become Hokage or not is a matter of a single sentence from me. Precisely because I may become Hokage, Minato replied calmly, I must speak for the village's future. Hiruzen's heart shook as he glanced sideways. Wenlan's lips curled slightly upward, but the chill in his eyes toward the daimyo remained. The daimyo's pupils contracted. As he was about to speak again, Wenlan stepped forward half a pace. Minato is right. If post-war compensation cannot be honored, how can morale be stabilized? Daimyo sir, Konoha's ninja are not numbers on your ledger. The atmosphere tightened instantly. Guards gripping blades stiffened. The daimyo stared coldly. And who are you? Has Konoha lost all sense of order, letting anyone defy me? My name is Uchiha Wenlan said calmly, his left hand resting on his scabbard. You should know the Uchiha's reputation isn't exactly stellar. But I don't care about reputation, I act as I please. So tell me, daimyo sir, if the Uchiha killed you for the sake of the village, would Konoha call me a hero? Please donate and support me. 67, Chapter 67, Did Danzo escape from prison? Wenlan. Everyone present turned pale at his words, and Minato even barked a low reprimand. The fire daimyo's pupils shrank sharply. He clenched his fan until it creaked. You dare commit regicide? Why not? Wenlan sneered, his left thumb nudging the tsuba, exposing a sliver of gleaming blade. You're nothing more than a nominal ruler of the land of fire. I let you sit there, so you get to sit peacefully. If I don't, do you really think these trash-tier guards of yours could stop me? A flash of steel cut through the air. With a sharp crack, the daimyo's fan split cleanly in two, fragments scattering everywhere. The daimyo staggered back, his chair screeching against the floor, face drained of all color. The Uchiha's Sharingan Genjutsu is unrivaled, this you know very well. I don't even bother wasting chakra on you. One look is enough to trap you in endless illusion, never to return. Your so-called power and status are a joke. If you won't obey, I can always replace you with someone who will. Wenlan, what do you think you're doing, rebelling? Koharu Yudatan slammed the table and shouted. Wenlan snapped his gaze toward her. In the next instant, Koharu froze in place. Her pupils went unfocused, cold sweat pouring down her face. Wenlan's Sharingan had already activated, Genjutsu flooding her consciousness like a tide. She collapsed back into her chair, gasping for air as if pulled from deep water, face deathly pale. Wenlan slowly withdrew his gaze and swept his eyes across the room, then turned back to the daimyo and spoke calmly. Konoha's funding will not be reduced. Not only that, it will be doubled. I've said my piece. Do you agree, or do you object? The daimyo trembled. His lips quivered, but no sound came out. Dead silence filled the hall, broken only by the faint whisper of wine through the pillars. After a long moment, he nodded stiffly, sweat dripping from his temples onto the broken fan handle. Wenlan narrowed his eyes slightly and sheathed his blade. He knew that with this single step, the shadow of the Uchiha had fully fallen over the political heart of the land of fire. From this day on, no one would dare meet his eyes directly. Minato Namikaze did not approve of Wenlan's methods, but the results were undeniable. He couldn't bring himself to rebuke him. Minato understood clearly, Wenlan was a double-edged sword, one that would never turn on its wielder, but left unchecked, could one day bring calamity. At that moment, a figure suddenly appeared at the entrance to the council chamber. An ANBU ninja. He dropped to one knee and reported urgently, Hokage sir, Advisor Danzo has escaped from prison. Every pupil in the room constricted violently. Wenlan spun around, sharing and locking onto the ANBU, his voice colder than a blade of ice. Escaped? How? The ANBU instinctively glanced at Hiruzen. Hiruzen gave a slight nod. The ANBU continued, we don't know. Two Uchiha Jonin guarding the prison suddenly fell unconscious and haven't awakened yet. Investigation suggests they were hit by Genjutsu. Danzo's cell is completely intact, no signs of battle. The locks are undamaged. It's as if he vanished into thin air. Wenlan's eyes turned icy. Genjutsu capable of incapacitating Uchiha Jonin with 3 Tomo Sharingan, and extracting someone without a sound. Only one name came to mind. Uchiha Obito. Mangekyo Sharingan versus 3 Tomo was like a father beating his child. And coupled with Obito's spacetime dojutsu. But where could Danzo have gone? More importantly, why would Obito help Danzo? Wenlan's thoughts raced. Who did Danzo hate the most right now? Him. What did Danzo want to destroy? The Uchiha. With no power base left, only remnants of root hiding in the shadows, Danzo alone posed little threat. Unless, he borrowed external power. But Obito had never allied with Danzo in the original timeline. Danzo should have been worthless to Obito. Unless. The plan. Wenlan's eyes widened. The Eye of the Moon plan had one absolutely crucial element. The Rinnegan. During the Third Great Ninja War, Danzo conspired with Hanzo of the Salamander to wipe out the original Akatsuki. Yahiko died by Nagato's hand. In his rage, Nagato summoned the Gadu statue, awakening the true power of the Rinnegan. Only the clan heads present at the time and those in the Hokage building knew Danzo had been imprisoned. That meant Danzo could still bluff, using the title of Hokage's advisor to approach Hanzo. His objective would be clear. The Rinnegan. With the legendary eyes of the Sage of Six Paths, Danzo would believe himself invincible. Wenlon suddenly realized something even more terrifying. He had forgotten Nagato and the others. Because of Wenlan's actions against Kirigakur and his display of Kage-level strength, Iwagakur's movement slowed compared to Kanon. The Earth Country front ended earlier than it should have. Which meant, Yahiko might still be alive. If Nagato could be brought under his banner. Wenlon turned sharply to Nairi and Shursui. Nairi. Shursui. With me. He bolted out immediately. Everyone present instantly realized one thing. Wenlon probably knew where Danzo was. Hiruzen shouted at once, follow him. If necessary, keep Danzo alive. 5ANBU vanished in an instant, shadows chasing shadows. Minato moved to follow, but Hiruzen stopped him. Minato. You're about to become Hokage. This isn't the time. Minato paused, then anxiety flashed in his eyes. Hokage sir, I have to go. Wenlon is the son of an old comrade, I must protect him. With that, he vanished in a flash, racing after Wenlon. Minato trusted Wenlan's strength, but the ANBU's description of Danzo's disappearance was too strange. Something felt wrong. Wenlon tore through the forest at breakneck speed, wind screaming past his ears. When a golden flash appeared beside him, Wenlon was momentarily startled. Master Minato, why are you here? I don't trust you to act with restraint, Minato replied quietly. You're too reckless. Wenlon curled his lips. I'm not Hokage. I don't need to worry about all that. You know where Danzo is? Minato asked, ignoring the jab. I have a theory, Wenlon replied, eyes sharp. Danzo himself is just a bonus. The real objective is 3 other people. Please donate and support me. 68, Chapter 68, Saving the Trio. The Land of Rain. Rain poured endlessly here, year after year. The downpour washed over the earth, leaving the stones on the ground slick and treacherous. On a high outcropping of rock stood Hanzo of the Salamander, cloaked in a long robe and wearing his signature gas mask. In his hand, he held Konan, her wrists bound tightly together. Behind him stood several Omegakure shinobi, alongside Danzo Shimura, his right eye covered, and more than a dozen root operatives wearing animal masks. Below the rock stood 2 figures. One was the orange-haired Yahiko. The other, the red-haired Nagato. To me, your organization is nothing but an eyesore. Hanzo said coldly. Yahiko, as the leader, you will die here today. If you continue resisting, this woman dies. He pressed a kunai against Konan's throat. The cold metal touched her skin as rainwater slid down the blade, mixing with the soaked strands of hair on her forehead and dripping into her eyes. Yahiko's breathing abruptly stopped. Hatred burned in his eyes as he stared at Hanzo, his fingers digging deep into his palms. He had only wanted to build a bridge of understanding between people, a path toward peace. So why had it come to this? He was an Omegakure ninja too. A child of the rain. Rain slid down his trembling fingertips and fell into the mud below, like drops sinking into a bottomless abyss. Nagato's Rinnegan quivered faintly behind the curtain of rain. His nails bit into his palms, blood mixing with rainwater and trickling down. He stared at Yahiko's rigid back, his throat tightening as if an invisible hand were choking him. Konan's breathing was weak, yet there was no fear in her eyes, only absolute trust in the 2 of them. Thunk. Hanzo threw the kunai toward Yahiko. It embedded itself in the ground at Yahiko's feet, splashing up mud. A cruel smile appeared beneath Hanzo's mask. You there, the red-haired one. Pick it up and kill Yahiko. Do that, and I'll spare you and this woman. Stop. Konan screamed. Nagato, don't listen. You 2 run. Konan. Yahiko's tense body suddenly relaxed. Nagato stiffened, turning to him. Yahiko looked at Nagato with eyes full of resolve, of absolute willingness to die. Kill me. Nagato's pupils shook violently. He didn't want anyone to die. Seeing Nagato hesitate, Yahiko shouted. Nagato. Stop it. Konan's voice tore through the rain. Nagato trembled from head to toe, breathing erratically as rainwater flooded his mouth and nose. Confusion and despair consumed him. As if possessed, he picked up the kunai from the ground. Yahiko. Konan. Nagato raised his head helplessly. At that moment, Yahiko suddenly rushed forward at full speed, aiming to impale himself on the kunao in Nagato's hand. It happened too fast. Nagato, frozen in panic, reacted far too slowly. By the time he realized what was happening, resistance transmitted through his hand. The feeling of metal piercing flesh. Whoosh! A barely perceptible sound rang out. A golden figure appeared between Yahiko and Nagato. One hand pressed firmly against Yahiko's chest, stopping him from moving forward even an inch. Seriously. I almost arrived too late. A gentle voice sounded. Everyone froze in shock as they saw the blonde figure standing there. Danzo's pupils shrank. Hanzo's pupils shrank. Namikaze Minato. Hey! A voice thundered alongside roaring lightning. You two old dogs really don't know how to behave. Lightning tore through the rain as a golden flash ripped across the sky. The streak of lightning struck straight toward Hanzo's face, forcing him to roll away in embarrassment. When Hanzo regained his footing, he looked up in shock and fury. A small figure stood beside Conan. A long, slender ninja blade rested casually on his shoulder. An eerie smile hung on his face, and the three tomo Sharingan in his eyes slowly rotated. Conan lifted her head in surprise, staring at the figure before her. He wasn't tall. Yet he felt as solid and reassuring as a mountain. An indescribable sense of safety filled her heart. Several figures landed swiftly behind Wenlan, Anbu Shinobi, and Shursui and Nayari. Shursui immediately activated his Sharingan, scanning the surroundings. Nayari silently drew his kunao and positioned himself protectively near Conan. Hanzo did not recognize Wenlan. After all, the Land of Rain had isolated itself ever since the Second Shinobi World War nearly destroyed Omegakure. Information from the outside world arrived slowly, if at all. But he knew Minato. Furious, Hanzo shouted, Namikaze Minato. You dare interfere in Omegakure's internal affairs. Does Konoha want to go to war with us? Minato's expression was cold, his blonde hair fluttering in the rain as his blue eyes locked onto Hanzo. Sorry, he said calmly. I can't stand by and watch children slaughter each other. Nagato still clutched the blood-stained kunao. Seeing the blood on Yahiko's chest, he panicked and threw the weapon away, hastily channeling chakra to heal Yahiko. Yahiko, upon seeing Minato, finally relaxed completely and collapsed to the ground. In truth, the kunao had only broken the skin, nothing serious. But the sudden release of overwhelming tension left him utterly drained. Because Jiraiya was from Konoha, Yahiko had always harbored trust and goodwill toward Konoha ninja. Wenlan tapped the back of his blade against his shoulder and turned toward Danzo. Danzo, I figured you'd escape prison sooner or later. What I didn't expect was for someone to actually help you. That idiot calling himself Uchiha Madara. He's here too, isn't he? There was no response. Wenlan immediately understood Obito wasn't present. He had no intention of exposing Obito's identity yet. The game had only just begun, revealing the final boss too early would ruin the fun. Uchiha Wenlan. Danzo glared at him in rage, teeth grinding as if about to shatter. Your dad's right here, Wenlan replied casually. He stepped forward, slashing his blade in a sharp arc, sneering. Danzo, don't worry, I won't kill you. I'll make sure you're tortured to death properly. The moment Wenlan said I won't kill you, the five accompanying Anbu visibly relaxed. Kill me. Danzo tore the bandages off his right arm, snarling. Let's see if you have what it takes. 3 Sharingan were embedded in his arm. Wenlan froze for a split second, then understood immediately. Obito gave them to him. Danzo roared. This is the moment you were born for. 2 root members stepped forward, kneeling on one knee. For Lord Danzo. Each pulled out a chunk of flesh from their ninja pouches. Danzo rapidly formed hand seals. Impure world reincarnation. He slammed his hands onto the ground. Black, tadpole-like characters spread outward, enveloping the 2 root operatives. Wenlan's expression changed. He hadn't expected Danzo to know Edo Tensei. Then realization struck him. Tobirama Senja had used Edo Tensei in the Second Shinobi World War. And Danzo was Tobirama's student. Of course he knew it. Please donate and support me. 69, Chapter 69, Edo Tensei, Hashirama and Tobirama. Wenlan wanted to stop it, but it was already too late. The 2 root members were engulfed by earth, their bodies wrapped tightly as agonized screams rang out from within the soil. Very quickly, the earth hardened, solidifying into stone coffin-like shells. The screams abruptly ceased. The next instant, boom! Violent chakra erupted from the two coffins, blasting them apart. Two figures emerged. One had long black hair, clad in red armor, his features sharp and resolute as if carved from stone. The other had white hair, dressed in blue armor, his gaze cold like moonlight reflected on an icy lake. Senju Hashirama. Senju Tobirama. The Anbu, as well as Nairi and Shursui, all had their pupils shrink violently. Others might not recognize them, but they did. Those faces were carved into the Hokage monument, visible every single day. The two figures stood amid shattered rock, their presence vast and unfathomable, like an abyssal sea. The pressure alone made it hard to breathe. Their gazes swept across the battlefield, chakra surging like tidal waves through the air. Tobirama's eyes immediately locked onto Wenlan. When he saw the Sharingan, his eyes narrowed slightly. An evil Uchiha. Yet there was not much killing intent in his tone. Oh. Hashirama, on the other hand, curiously knocked on his own armor, then pinched his cheek. So I'm back. My body feels, kind of strange. His behavior felt completely unreliable. It's Edo Tensei, Tobirama said, frowning slightly. Then he turned his head and saw Danzo. Danzo, you've grown old. First Hokage sir. Teacher. Danzo dropped to one knee, his voice hoarse and heavy. Please, kill this evil Uchiha for the sake of Konoha. Uchiha causing trouble again. Tobirama's chakra suddenly surged violently, crushing down on everyone present. Even Hanzo of the Salamander went pale, his chakra circulation momentarily disrupted. Tobirama. Hashirama barked sharply. His expression was now serious, his gaze burning as it swept across the crowd before settling on Wenlan. Has the Uchiha truly fallen to this point? Heh, Wenlan chuckled. Hashirama sir. Second Hokage. The moment Tobirama heard the difference in how he was addressed, his already cold face darkened instantly, black as the bottom of a pot. I am the current third elder of the Uchiha, Uchiha Wenlan, Wenlan said, stepping forward. I'll explain everything to the two of you. Then he turned his gaze toward Tobirama. Under the second Hokage's wise leadership, the entire village of Konoha now despises the Uchiha. Anyone who didn't know better would think we'd committed some unforgivable crime. In the Third Shinobi World War that just ended, the Uchiha contributed immensely. Yet after the war, we received not a single benefit. And your excellent disciples, Hiruzen Sarutobi and Danzo Shimura, used public opinion to force Konoha's white fan into suicide. The Senju clan exists in name only now. Your grandson, Noeke, is dead. His internal organs were completely removed, leaving behind nothing but an empty shell. The Senju clan now has only Tsunade left. Wenlan's words were like knives stabbing straight into Hashirama and Tobirama's hearts. Hashirama's expression dimmed. He knew everyone would die eventually, that was unavoidable. Oh, right, Wenlan added casually. Your grandson was only 12 years old when he died. Boom. Tobirama's chakra exploded violently. His voice dropped, thunderous and cold, his eyes flashing like lightning as they locked onto Danzo. Is what he said true? The pressure crushed down on Danzo, making him tremble uncontrollably. Cold sweat poured down his face, he couldn't even speak. Don't be in such a hurry, Wenlan said with a smile, waving his hand. The Uzumaki clan was also wiped out under the third Hokage you personally approved, Hiruzen Sarutobi. They were besieged by multiple villages, and the third Hokage didn't even dare to fart. He just stood by and watched the Uzumaki clan be destroyed. If Lady Mito hadn't still been alive, I'm afraid the third Hokage wouldn't have lifted a finger at all. A once great clan, reduced to just a handful of survivors. At this point, both Hashirama and Tobirama looked terrible, especially Hashirama. His wife was from the Uzumaki clan, and back when they married, he had personally promised that Konoha would forever protect the Uzumaki. Oh, and one more thing. Wenlan added brightly. Second Hokage, your prized Uchiha, Uchiha Kagami, is dead too. Although it was officially labeled, death in battle, his Sharingan was personally dug out by this dog, Danzo, and implanted into his own body. As for whether Kagami really died on the battlefield, who knows? At any rate, we Uchiha never saw his corpse. Tobirama's eyes instantly turned blood red. He had already noticed the Sharingan embedded in Danzo's arm. Wenlan's words made it clear. Kagami didn't die on the battlefield. Sharingan were priceless on the battlefield. If an enemy collected them, there was no chance they'd ever be returned. The fact that Danzo possessed Kagamai's eyes meant only one thing. Danzo! Tobirama roared, appearing instantly in front of him and gripping his throat. You dare defile the fallen heroes of Konoha. Kagamai was your comrade, yet you desecrated his body and stained his honor. Danzo's face went deathly pale, his pupils shaking violently, still unable to say a word. In desperation, Danzo pulled out a talisman from his ninja pouch and slammed it into Tobirama's body with lightning speed, then withdrew his hand. Tobirama's body stiffened, his grip loosening involuntarily. Danzo collapsed to the ground, gasping for air. Tobirama frowned, sensing his body, then looked down at Danzo. What did you do to me? Hearing Tobirama speak, Danzo's pupils shrank sharply. He stared up in disbelief. The control talisman was clearly embedded inside Tobirama. So why did Tobirama still have consciousness? Seeing this, Wenlon burst out laughing. Ha ha ha. The laughter drew everyone's attention. Tobirama frowned. What are you laughing at? Ha ha ha, I'm laughing at how stupid this bastard Danzo is. Wenlon slapped his thigh. Danzo, that control talisman was given to you by Orochimaru, wasn't it? Danzo froze. A terrible premonition surged through his heart. And yes, I forgot to mention something, Wenlon continued with a wicked grin. Hashirama's and the second Hokage's bodies have been lying peacefully in their coffins the whole time. So tell me, how exactly did you perform Edo Tensei on the two of them? Sure. Mu. Ra. Dan. Zo. Tobirama ground his teeth, staring at him with murderous fury. You dared treat my brother's remains like this. I will never forgive you. Please donate and support me. 70, Chapter 70, The Four Symbols Seal. Although Senjo Tobirama could not quite be called the god of shinobi, his strength was still far beyond anything Danzo could compare to. With a single punch, Tobirama blew Danzo's head apart. Blood sprayed everywhere. Tobirama's chest heaved violently with rage. A mist of blood drifted through the rain-lashed air. Nearby, Hanzo didn't even dare to breathe loudly. After all, standing there was a shinobi god. Hanzo, at best a so-called demigod, a title inflated by reputation, was nothing more than a man whose real danger lay in his poison. But the one before him was a figure universally acknowledged by the ninja world. Hanzo's legs trembled slightly, sweat soaking the grip of his weapon. The torrential rain washed over him, yet he felt no chill at all. Rainwater slid down Tobirama's hair as he slowly turned, frowning. Something's wrong. The caster is dead. Why hasn't Edo Tensei been released? Edo Tensei, release. Suddenly, Danzo's hoarse shout rang out from afar. Tobirama snapped his head around, only to find that the corpse at his feet was gone. Danzo stood in the distance, holding the release seal of Edo Tensei in his hand. At the same time, one of the Sharingan embedded in Danzo's arm turned gray and lifeless. Izanage. Tobirama's eyes turned icy again. He was about to move. But suddenly, his body began to crumble into paper-like fragments. A powerful sensation of his soul being torn away surged through him. Tobirama's pupils shrank sharply. He turned toward Wenlon and roared. Uchiha brat, kill him. With those final words, both Tobirama's and Hashirama's bodies completely dispersed, leaving behind only the two sacrificed root corpses. From start to finish, Senjo Hashirama remained silent, standing there calmly. Perhaps he was disappointed with what the village had become. Or perhaps filled with regret over the Senjo and Uzumaki clans. Even with his overwhelming power, enough to forcibly break Edo Tensei's control, he still chose not to leave his soul behind. Wenlon rested his ninja blade on his shoulder and smiled at Danzo. Old dog, did you hear that? Your teacher told me to kill you. Danzo's face twisted grotesquely. Evil Uchiha, I will kill you today. He launched himself forward in a suicidal charge. He knew that ordinary attacks could no longer harm Wenlon. There was only one way left. Activate the four symbols seal at point-blank range. Wenlon let out a light laugh. He sheathed his blade, lowered his stance like a drawn bow, left hand gripping the scabbard, right hand on the hilt. Inhale. Thunder breathing, first form, haze. The next instant, violent golden lightning erupted from the blade, tearing through the rain like a divine bolt. Everyone's vision flashed. And Danzo's head flew straight into the air. Blood gushed forth like a fountain. His headless body stood frozen for a moment, then collapsed heavily to the ground. But in the next second, Danzo's corpse vanished. Suddenly, two massive hands wrapped around Wenlan's body. "Evil Uchiha brat, die with me." Danzo clung to him tightly, a feral grin spreading across his face. Wenlan frowned sharply and instantly opened the sixth gate of the 8 gates, Gate of View. The violent chakra surge vaporized the flesh on Danzo's arms, reducing them to bare bone. Yet those skeletal arms remained locked together, gripping Wenlan's chest with terrifying strength. They wouldn't come loose. Danzo's laughter echoed through the rain. Black blood poured from his chest, splattering across Wenlan's body. In the air, a gigantic 4 symbols pattern manifested. Wenlan. Minato Namikaze's pupils contracted violently. He rushed forward, trying to save Wenlan. But it was already too late. Naori's 3-tomo Sharingan spun wildly as he charged toward Wenlan, but Shursui grabbed him tightly from behind. "Shursui, damn it, let go of me. Let go." Third Elder. Naori roared hysterically, his eyes bloodshot, his Sharingan almost tearing apart its own sockets. He slammed his elbows back again and again into Shisui's ribs, his throat releasing feral, animalistic growls. At that moment, Naori's Sharingan began to subtly change. Shursui clenched his teeth, staring at Wenlan's body being engulfed in black blood. He knew how terrifying the 4 symbols seal was. If Naori rushed in now, he would only be throwing his life away. Naori's screams tore through the rainstorm, but Shisui's arms remained like iron clamps. Nearby, Conan stared blankly at the distance. He was even younger than her. He had saved her. And she hadn't even had the chance to say thank you before her savior was about to die right in front of her. Black blood continued to gush and spread, completely covering Wenlan's body. "Old dog, this was your plan." Wenlan's voice carried a trace of disdain. His right hand lifted the ninja blade again. He couldn't cut through the skeletal restraint. Even his upper arm struggled to move against Danzo's desperate grip. This was Danzo's final strength, amplified by the 4 symbols seal. Then, Wenlan slashed off his own left arm. Blood erupted. Without a change in expression, Wenlan impaled the severed arm with his blade and hurled it toward Naori. The arm cut through the rain, leaving a trail of blood droplets in the air. Naori's pupils shrank. He instinctively reached out. But Shursui was still holding him back. He couldn't catch it. At that moment, a slender figure rushed forward and caught the arm midair. It was Conan. She caught the severed arm, but her exhausted body slammed heavily into the ground. Her stamina had long since been depleted, otherwise, she wouldn't have been captured by Hanzo so easily. Yet somehow, without knowing why, she had forced out every last bit of strength to catch that arm. "Go die." Danzo roared as black chakra flooded into Wenlan's body. The 4 symbols seal condensed into a pitch-black sphere, rapidly expanding, devouring rain, air, and space itself. The figures of Wenlan and Danzo were gradually swallowed by the darkness. Everyone nearby retreated rapidly, fleeing the seal's range. Shursui dragged Naori toward Minato. After a moment's hesitation, the Anbu grabbed Conan by the shoulder and retreated as well. The severed arm in Conan's embrace continued to bleed, its fingers twitching faintly, as if a trace of its owner's will still lingered. There was no explosion, only a blinding flash of white light. Everyone instinctively shut their eyes. When they opened them again, the massive stone outcrop was gone. In its place lay a vast emptiness, with only a semicircular crater carved deeply into the ground. Hanzo and the Rain Village shinobi stood at a distance, frowning at the scene. Root forces stood on the opposite side, forming a triangle with Rain and Minato's group. Danzo's figure slowly emerged from the crater. Surveying the surroundings, he burst into wild laughter. "Ha ha ha ha, evil Uchiha brat, you're finally dead." Minato clenched his fists, teeth grinding. His pupils trembled slightly, betraying the turmoil in his heart. Nagato, Yahiko, and Conan stared blankly at the crater. They all knew that child had rushed in to save Conan. And now, he had died just like that. Naori, finally released by Shursui, saw the scene and roared in fury, punching Shursui hard in the face. Shursui was sent crashing to the ground. He didn't fight back. His eyes, too, were filled with grief. Please donate and support me. 71, Chapter 71, Ultra Speed Regeneration. Amid Danzo's manic laughter and everyone's stunned silence, Conan suddenly sensed that something was wrong. The arm in her embrace was moving. Her eyes widened in terror as she looked down, flesh buds were sprouting from the severed limb. She screamed and instinctively threw the arm away. That sharp cry drew everyone's attention, including Danzo's. But within seconds, shock and fear replaced all other expressions. Before their very eyes, the arm regenerated at an astonishing speed. First bone, bare and white, then tendons, blood vessels, muscle, and skin rapidly formed layer by layer. In less than a minute, a fully intact Wenlan, naked and whole, stood there. With his back to the crowd, he rolled his neck. Crack, crack. The sound of joints resetting echoed clearly through the rain. He pulled the ninja blade out of his regenerated arm, spun it casually in a flourish, then turned his head toward everyone. Hey, what are those looks for? Anyone got clothes? I don't have a habit of flashing people. No one answered. Only the sound of rain falling endlessly. Even Danzo and Hanzo were frozen in place. What had they just witnessed? A man reduced to a single arm, who regenerated his entire body in under a minute. This flat-out defied common sense. Even Senjo Hashirama, the god of shinobi, couldn't do something like this. Seeing everyone in a daze, Wenlan sighed and walked toward Yahiko. Yahiko recoiled in fear. Wenlan ignored him completely, grabbed the outer cloak of Yahiko's Akatsuki robe, ripped it off, and put it on himself. Though it still didn't cover much below the waist. Only then did Yahiko react, screaming in horror. A G-ghost. Ghost your ass. Wenlan kicked Yahiko flat onto the ground in annoyance. After a moment's thought. Well, Yahiko wasn't entirely wrong. But Wenlan wasn't a real ghost anyway. A fake demon. Like Kibutsuji Muzan. A true demon. Those guys were on a whole different level. Standing in the rain, Wenlan glanced down at his bare legs and tugged awkwardly at the hem of the robe. How is this possible? Danzo cried out, staring at Wenlan in sheer terror. Surprised. Wenlan turned toward him calmly. Otherwise, why do you think I use the 8 gates like it's eating and drinking? Let me put it plainly, I'm completely immortal. Impossible. There's no way such a thing exists. Danzo drew a kunao and charged at Wenlan in a frenzy. Wenlan watched him rush forward like a cornered dog, ready to strike. But suddenly, something felt wrong. The air around him turned viscous for an instant. In the next moment, Wenlan's blade flashed. Not toward Danzo, but toward Nagato. The slash tore through the rain, aiming straight for Nagato's throat. Wenlan. What are you doing? Everyone was stunned by Wenlan's sudden move. Before anyone could react, an arm appeared out of thin air, spinning through the air before falling heavily to the ground. On that severed arm were 2 gray, lifeless eyes. And one Sharingan. A scream rang out as Danzo's figure reappeared. He clutched his right arm with his left, teeth clenched, and then lunged with his remaining hand straight toward Nagato's eyes. His attack on Wenlan had been a feint. His true goal was the Rinnegan. As long as he obtained the legendary eyes of the Sage of 6 Paths, even Wenlan would be no match for him. At that instant, several root shinobi behind him simultaneously cast genjutsu on everyone present. Bang! Wenlan's foot slammed into Danzo's abdomen, sending him flying and tumbling across the ground. Using genjutsu on Uchiha. Wenlan sneered. What kind of dog brain comes up with that idea? Have you always been this brave? He paused, then added thoughtfully. Well, to be fair, you are pretty brave. After all, you dared to stab Susanoo with a kunao later on. Shursui, Nairi, control him. Seal his chakra. Wenlan barked. Yes. Both moved instantly. The root shinobi weren't about to sit still and rushed forward to rescue Danzo. But the name Shursui of the body flicker wasn't earned for nothing. Shursui alone intercepted all of them. In an instant, more than a dozen Shisuas appeared across the battlefield, not shadow clones, but afterimages and rapid body flickers. Illusions and reality overlapped, leaving the root forces completely unable to break through. Meanwhile, Nairi seized the opening, formed seals, and slammed both palms onto Danzo's chest. Dense black sealing patterns, like swarming tadpoles, spread instantly across Danzo's entire body. Perhaps out of sheer hatred, Nairi followed up with a punch to Danzo's head, knocking him unconscious. Shursui, fighting over a dozen root operatives alone, held his ground evenly. Wenlan turned his gaze to the ANBU nearby and said coldly, "You just going to watch?" The 5 ANBU snapped back to attention and immediately joined the fight. Before long, the remaining root shinobi were completely wiped out. And Hanzo? He had already fled. The rain continued to fall, washing away the blood. Wenlon wanted to pursue, but Minato stopped him. If they chased Hanzo now, it would amount to declaring war on a Megakure. The situation would spiral out of control. Konoha couldn't afford another war. Wenlon could only watch coldly as Hanzo disappeared into the rain. "Run while you can," he muttered. "I'll let you live a little longer." At that moment, Yahiko, Nagato, and Konan stepped forward and bowed deeply. "Thank you, for saving us." Wenlon waved it off, then shot Minato a meaningful glance. Minato nodded slightly and spoke gently. "You're Nagato, right?" "Hello. My name is Namikaze Minato. My wife is also from the Uzumaki clan." Uzumaki clan. Nagato looked at Minato in confusion. The Uzumaki clan was allied with Konoha, Wenlon added from the side. Though his tone carried unmistakable irony. Though they were wiped out. Red hair and massive chakra reserves, that's the hallmark of the Uzumaki. "And you, Nagato, you are Uzumaki." "Yes," Minato continued. "A Megakure is no longer safe for you. Would you like to come with us to Konoha?" Nagato stared blankly at Minato as rain slid down his hair. But memories surged unbidden, his parents, killed by Konoha shinobi when he was a child. His hands trembled slightly, pain and conflict flashing through his eyes. "Think carefully before you answer," Wenlon said, arms crossed. "Your Rinnegan can't stay hidden anymore. The only reason you survived this long was because Hanzo feared your power and wanted your eyes. This time he failed. Next time, he won't stop. Your Rinnegan hasn't awakened its full potential yet. Anyone who covets it could take it and bring disaster upon your companions. A man without guilt may still carry a treasure that invites disaster. You understand that, don't you?" Minato nodded solemnly. "Don't worry. I am the candidate for 4th Hokage. I guarantee your safety in the village, and I guarantee that no one will lay a hand on you. Please donate and support me." 72 Chapter 72 Uchiha Obito. Yahiko and Nagato both hesitated. After all, this kind of invitation was not the first they had received. Their teacher, Jiraiya, had once made a similar offer. Nagato's hesitation came from the fact that he still couldn't let go of the hatred in his heart, the hatred toward Konoha shinobi who had killed his parents. Yahiko, on the other hand, worried that leaving a Megakure would cause them to lose their only shelter and fall into even greater danger. Moreover, the Akatsuki already had quite a few companions. After a brief but heavy discussion, Yahiko stepped forward and bowed to Minato and Wenlon. "Please give us a moment. The three of us need to discuss this together." "Of course," Minato replied with a nod. The three walked off to the side and spoke in low voices. Minato then turned to Wenlon and said, "On the way here, I was puzzled why you insisted that I invite them to join Konoha. But the moment I saw Nagato's eyes, I understood." Wenlon shook his head lightly. "The Rinnegan is important, yes, but those eyes, they were never truly his." Minato's pupils contracted slightly. He lowered his voice. "You mean, there's something hidden behind those eyes?" Wenlan's gaze grew deep as he looked toward the youth standing in the rain. The Rinnegan was never supposed to appear on him. Someone implanted it, using the Uzumaki clan's physique to nurture the Rinnegan. That said, Nagato can use them. Minato wanted to ask more, but seeing that Wenlon had no intention of continuing, he ultimately said nothing. Soon, Yahiko and the others returned. Yahiko bowed respectfully. "We're willing to join Konoha, but we ask that you also take in the members of our organization." "That's no problem," Minato replied with a gentle smile. "But once you join Konoha, you can no longer operate as an independent organization. From now on, you'll all be Konoha shinobi." Yahiko nodded in agreement, though a trace of loss flashed through his eyes. He had founded Akatsuki in pursuit of peace. But today, he finally understood. Without sufficient strength, everything else was meaningless. They had no choice but to join Konoha. Without Konoha's protection, today's tragedy could repeat itself tomorrow. Deep underground, inside a hidden cavern, Obito sat on a stone chair, dim torchlight flickering around him. What? It failed. He stared in disbelief at the figure before him, Black Zetsu. Black Zetsu nodded. It was about to succeed in fully activating the Rinnegan, but Konoha shinobi interfered and rescued Yahiko and the others. And among them was a 5-year-old child, Uchiha Wenlan, a member of your clan. He knows that this, Uchiha Madara, you're posing as is fake. Obito's expression wavered for a brief instant. Pain pulsed through the white half of his body, forcing him to suppress the shock and turmoil in his heart. After a long moment, he took a deep breath and steadied himself. The plan won't change. Konoha now knows that Nagato possesses the Rinnegan. There's no way they'll leave such a treasure unused. Even if my teacher, the 4th Hokage, doesn't want to use it, that doesn't mean the 3rd Hokage and the others won't. Konoha's upper echelon will eventually covet those eyes. When that happens, Nagato will naturally be pushed back onto the path we originally designed. If Minato refuses to act, someone else will do it for him. As for that Uchiha Wenlan. Obito paused, then continued. The fact that he didn't expose my identity means he only thinks I'm pretending to be Uchiha Madara, and that he doesn't have concrete proof. He was likely testing me. And even if he's certain I'm not the real Madara, he still doesn't know who I really am. After all, in Konoha, my identity, he let out a low chuckle, belongs to a dead man. And the plan to collect the tailed beasts? Black Zetsu asked. Once I recover, I can gather others and form an organization to collect the tailed beasts. Nagato's role is merely to nurture the Rinnegan, and at the final moment, use Outer Path, Samsara of Heavenly Life to revive Uchiha Madara. As long as you have a plan, Black Zetsu said with a sinister grin. Obito slowly closed his eyes. The image of Rin's death surfaced once more, his heart tightening painfully. Black Zetsu, however, showed a trace of disdain in his gaze. Everything was for Mother. Back then, he had judged Wenlan to be troublesome, awakening a 3-tomo Sharingan at age 5 was genius level even by Warring State standards. That was why, during the 7 ninja swordsman's ambush, he intended to use them to eliminate Wenlan. But Wenlan's strength exceeded expectations, and Obito feared exposing himself, so he withdrew. Thinking of Obito's abnormal Kamui, Black Zetsu felt reassured. No matter how strong a technique was, it still had to hit. With Kamui, Obito stood invincible. Back in the land of rain. At present, Akatsuki was still a small organization, only a few dozen people at most. Most were genin, with the remainder being chunin. Only Yahiko possessed true jonin-level strength. If not for Nagato's Rinnegan, Hanzo would never have gone through so much trouble to set up that trap. The group rested overnight at Akatsuki's base and departed the next day. Wenlan also bought a new set of clothes in the land of rain, still black-themed. A black short-sleeved top and black trousers. The only problem was that his scabbard was gone, so he had to carry his blade openly. When he walked into the clothing shop earlier, the owner nearly thought Wenlan was there to rob the place. After all, ever since the Second Shinobi World War, the land of rain had fallen into decline. Many civilians could barely get enough to eat. Soon, the group left the borders of the land of rain and entered the land of fire. Green vegetation swayed gently in the morning light, dew sliding from leaf tips. Warm sunlight bathed everyone, especially the members of Akatsuki, who stared around them in awe. In the land of rain, it rained year-round, sunlight was a rare sight. The environment there was bleak, sparse vegetation, barren land, air thick with damp decay. Civilians gnawed on bark and grass roots, never seeing such lush greenery. Walking along the winding paths of the land of fire, breathing fresh air, felt like stepping into another world. Because many Akatsuki members were genin, they couldn't travel at full speed. As a result, it took nearly 7 days before they finally arrived at Konoha. The gate guards were momentarily stunned at the sight of such a large group. But upon seeing Namikaze Minato, Wenlan, and the ANBU at the front, they immediately stepped forward. Konoha was strict on entry but lax on exit. Regardless of whether you were a Konoha shinobi or a foreigner, entering the village required registration and identity checks. Leaving, however, was much simpler. Since Hiruzen Sarutobi had already given instructions after returning, only a brief registration was required before letting everyone through. As they entered Konoha and saw the bustling village, the Akatsuki members looked dazed, as if in a dream. This place was completely different from the land of rain. Shops lined the streets, children chased each other under the sun, laughter ringing through the air. The smell of rice, miso soup, and snacks drifted everywhere. People wore peaceful smiles, utterly unaware of the horrors of war that had ravaged other lands. "Please support me," 73, Chapter 73, Orochimaru's Experimental Progress. Yahiko, Conan, and Nagato looked at the scene before them in a daze. Wasn't this exactly the kind of peace they had always longed for? Minato turned to Wenlan and said, I need to go to the Hokage's office and report this to Lord Hokage. You handle the arrangements for now. All right. Wenlan nodded, then turned to Nairi and Shursui, lowering his voice. Nairi, take that old dog Danzo back to prison. Shursui, take them to the Uchiha compound for the time being. Let them stay there to avoid stirring up unnecessary trouble. And tell the clan head to issue a public order. From now on, anyone who approaches the Uchiha compound without reporting in will be executed on the spot, including ANBU. Shursui froze when he heard the last sentence and hurriedly said, Isn't that a bit? Shursui, Wenlan cut him off coldly, his gaze sharp, I'm informing you, not discussing this with you. Yes, third elder. In the end, Shursui could only lower his head and comply. Nagato and the other two looked at Wenlan with gratitude. They all understood that once Nagato's Rinnegan was exposed, countless forces would covet it, and his safety would be under constant threat. After giving his instructions, Wenlan vanished in a flash, heading straight for Orochimaru's residence. When he arrived at the shabby wooden door, Wenlan clicked his tongue. He still couldn't believe this was where one of the legendary Sannin lived. He knocked. After some rustling inside, a hoarse voice sounded. Who is it? It's me, Wenlan. The door opened, revealing Orochimaru's exhausted face. His golden pupils were bloodshot, eye discharge clung to the corners, and a layer of grime coated his skin. Wenlan was startled. Damn, don't tell me you haven't slept at all. He. Orochimaru chuckled softly. Experiments don't give you time to sleep. Though his body looked worn, his eyes still burned with manic excitement as he turned and walked inside. Wenlan followed him in and immediately frowned. The room was dim, curtains drawn tight, lights blazing. Scrolls and test tubes littered the floor. In the center stood an operating table, and the walls were covered with anatomical diagrams. A half-dead ninja was strapped to the table, his chest barely rising, still alive. When the ninja saw Wenlan, the despair in his eyes briefly turned into hope. His body trembled violently as he struggled, hoarse pleas escaping his throat. But his mouth was gagged, leaving only faint sounds. Wenlan frowned deeply and sat down on Orochimaru's bed. There was no chair available, it was buried under scrolls. Orochimaru, sir, the body is the capital of all research. If you keep this up, you'll die before finishing your work. Thank you for your concern, Master Wenlan. I feel wonderful. Orochimaru lifted a test tube and examined it under the light. A faint dark red glow shimmered within the liquid. Wenlan shook his head. He knew Orochimaru was already half-crazed. How's the blood research coming along? Wenlan asked. I've made a bit of progress. Orochimaru smiled with satisfaction, drew the liquid into a syringe, and walked toward the restrained ninja. The ninja was already extremely weak, but when Orochimaru approached, terror seized him and he struggled again, weakly, exhausted beyond limit. Orochimaru calmly leaned down and slowly injected the dark red liquid into the side of the ninja's neck. The ninja's pupils instantly dilated. A choking sound came from his throat as his limbs convulsed. Moments later, his body went rigid, his breathing stopped, and his pupils slowly spread. Then, his muscles began to swell. Strange patterns bulged across his body, something crawling beneath the skin. Veins stood out like writhing vines. His eye sockets split open, bloody tears streaming down his face under the harsh white light, dripping onto the edge of the operating table. His ribs tore apart, and two arms burst out of his torso, fingers twitching as they clawed at the air. The newly formed hands slammed into the table's edge, knuckles whitening, blood and tissue fluid oozing from torn flesh. Orochimaru stepped back half a pace. His face remained calm, but his tension was obvious. Wenlan watched from the bed, brows furrowed. This didn't surprise him, mutations like this were common among demons in Demon Slayer. Soon, the ninja tore free from his restraints and leapt up. His eyes filled with feral hostility as he charged straight at Orochimaru. Orochimaru didn't panic at all. He thrust his right hand forward. Several venomous snakes shot out from his sleeve, instantly binding the ninja's body. Hidden shadow snake hands. The ninja howled inhumanly as his new arms tore the snakes apart, blood splashing everywhere. Orochimaru's eyes lit up. Stronger than the last one. Without hurry, he pulled open the curtains. Sunlight flooded the room. The ninja screamed in agony. White steam poured from his body as if he were being burned alive. His skin peeled away layer by layer. He instinctively tried to flee into the bathroom, but Orochimaru kicked him straight back into the sunlight. After about 3 minutes of screaming, his body completely disintegrated and died. Orochimaru glanced coldly at the time. Survival time increased by about 34 seconds. That means higher cellular activity, but the photolysis reaction is still irreversible. He muttered to himself while rapidly recording notes. If inhibitory enzymes could be injected into the blood, it might delay sunlight decomposition. When Lon stared at the spot where the corpse vanished, his expression grim. This was far too slow. He only had 1 year. He needed 2 contingency plans. First, stop Uchiha Obito from releasing the 9 tails from Kushina. But that was extremely difficult. Obito's Kamui was terrifying, and when Lon currently had no reliable counter to spacetime techniques. Second, turn Kushina into a demon. But the transformation could not have any side effects. With Orochimaru's current progress, perfect conversion was nowhere in sight. Orochimaru kept scribbling, completely ignoring Wenlon. Suddenly, he snapped his head up. Master Wenlon, your blood supply isn't enough anymore. I need another sample. No, Wenlon replied coldly. Orochimaru's pupils shrank. Eternal life was right in front of him, yet Wenlon refused. Just as killing intent began to rise, Wenlon continued. Scientific research requires a clear mind. You're already obsessed. Continuing like this is just wasting time. An extra 3 or 5 seconds of survival means nothing. And this place is too close to residential areas. Even if we're using death row inmates, it'll still draw resentment. Once word reaches Konoha's upper levels, your research will be shut down. I'll arrange a hidden location for you to continue experiments. You'll rest for 3 days. After 3 days, I'll give you my blood again. Orochimaru fell silent. Please donate and support me. 74, Chapter 74. Let me treat you to a cup of judicial milk tea. When Orochimaru heard Wenlon say that, the killing intent he had just begun to stir instantly dissipated. At first, he had thought Wenlon was soft-hearted after seeing the human experiments. If that were the case, he would have been prepared to risk everything to kill Wenlon and seize his flesh and blood. But Wenlan's words afterward excited him instead, and made him realize that Wenlon was right. He had been obsessively researching in a single direction. Perhaps taking a few days to rest would spark a different line of inspiration and allow him to break through the bottleneck. The corners of Orochimaru's mouth lifted slightly, a rare trace of gentleness flashing through his eyes. Then I'll have to thank you, Master Wenlon. Wenlon stood up and shook his head. Orochimaru, sir, Orochimaru waved his hand. Master Wenlon, in front of you, I'm no longer some, sir. My immortality still depends on you. Just call me by my name. Wenlon paused slightly, then didn't insist. Orochimaru, our goals are the same. I may be immortal, but what I really want is to protect the people around me. Within 1 year, you must crack this problem. It'll be good for you, for me, and for everyone. I understand. Orochimaru let out a sinister laugh. After leaving Orochimaru's residence, Wenlon walked along a dim forest path, eventually arriving near the Uchiha compound. After a moment's thought, he turned and headed for the prison. Deep within the prison, there was not a sound. The guards did not stop Wenlon. Instead, they respectfully lowered their heads and stepped aside. After entering, he passed through a room reserved for Uchiha personnel to rest and provide support. 5 people were inside. When they saw Wenlon, they immediately stood up. Third Elder. After the battle against Kirigakure, Wenlan's strength, his ruthless tactics, and especially his feat of cleaving a tailed beast bomb, saving countless lives, had ensured that no Uchiha dared underestimate this 5-year-old child. 2 of you, come with me. Take me to see Danzo. The 5 instantly scrambled, eager to serve Wenlon. Wenlon looked at them helplessly, then simply took all 5 along. The dim corridor was lit only by flickering torches, their crackling the sole sound. On both sides, death row prisoners curled up in their cells. Hearing footsteps, they didn't even look up, their eyes were filled only with numbness and despair. They descended to the 3rd underground level, the deepest part of the prison. Every cell here was sealed with airtight, chakra-suppressing metal doors. As the heavy iron door slowly opened, a wave of icy air rushed out. Danzo's hunched figure sat in the corner, looking as miserable as a man could be. After returning from the land of rain, he had never dried off. His soaked clothes clung tightly to his withered body, frost forming thinly around his feet. All his former power and authority were gone. His right arm had been severed cleanly at the shoulder. The stump was wrapped in darkened bandages, faintly oozing pus and blood. He slowly raised his remaining left arm, trying to shield his eye from the harsh torchlight. In that single eye flickered resentment and unwillingness. When he saw Wenlan, there was no furious roaring, no venomous curses, only a twisted smile. "You came. In the end, you still won." His voice was hoarse like a dying ember, yet carried an eerie calm. Wenlan sneered lightly. "You don't seriously think pretending to behave will make me let you off, do you? Everything you've done to the Uchiha clan over the years, I haven't forgotten a single thing." Danzo's pupil contracted slightly as he narrowed his eye. "What do you want?" "Nothing much. I'm a soft-hearted person, I hate seeing people suffer." He then said to an Uchiha clansman beside him, "Go buy a cup of milk tea." The clansman froze, but quickly left. The entire prison fell into deathly silence. Before long, the ninja returned at a run, holding a cup of milk tea. Wenlan took it, gently blew away the steam, then flicked his ninja blade. A lock of hair from Danzo's head landed on the blade. Wenlan slashed rapidly, mincing the hair into tiny fragments that fell into the milk tea. "Danzo, today I'm treating you to a cup of milk tea. It has a name, judicial milk tea. I wonder how long someone like you, who still retains a ninja's physique, can endure it." His eyes turned cold as he handed the cup to the clansman beside him. "Pour it down his throat." Seeing the approaching Uchiha ninja, Danzo panicked. He didn't know what this so-called judicial milk tea was, but he knew it couldn't be anything good. He tried to struggle, but he was far too weak. Two ninjas held him down and forced it into him. The milk tea poured down his throat. Danzo choked violently. After it was finished, he clawed at his throat, trying to vomit it out. Wenlan said calmly, "Don't waste your effort. The milk tea was just to help those hair fragments go down smoothly. The broken hairs will lodge in your stomach and intestines, impossible to digest. They'll tangle inside your gut, causing endless agony. Over time, they'll mix with food residue, forming clumps that block your intestines. The more you struggle, the more active your digestive system becomes, and the deeper they'll pierce. This isn't a fatal punishment. It's an unending torment, just like every hidden scheme and betrayal you set against the Uchiha clan back then. Now it's your turn to experience that day-after-day agony." Danzo's face twisted in pain, cold sweat pouring down his temples. The Uchiha clansmen nearby, who had initially not understood the method, turned pale upon hearing Wenlan's explanation and instinctively took several steps back. This is a living king of hell. How did he even come up with something this vicious? Terrifying, utterly terrifying. They silently vowed to warn their families, never, ever provoke the third elder. Wenlan stood in the dim cell, his gaze as calm as a frozen abyss. Clutching his stomach as stabbing pain spread, Danzo glared at Wenlan and roared, "Uchiha Wenlan, you won't die well." "Whether I die or not," Wenlan replied with a strange smile, "you know that better than anyone." Danzo recalled Wenlan's horrifying regenerative ability, his face growing even uglier. "Enjoy it," Wenlan said lightly. "Our esteemed Hokage aide." He turned and walked out of the cell, adding to the Uchiha guards, "For the time being, aside from delivering food and water, don't come to the third level. Don't let him die." "Yes, third elder." The five responded in unison. The cell doors slowly closed, iron bars slicing Danzo's twisted face into fragments. Wenlan's footsteps never hesitated, boots echoing across the stone corridor as the sound faded away. Behind him, the third level filled with Danzo's screams and curses, but to Wenlan's ears, they sounded almost pleasant. The corners of his mouth lifted slightly, as if listening to a long-lost melody. Every cry of pain was a reckoning for past sins. Wenlan walked out of the dungeon at an unhurried pace. The night wind swept through the corridor. He brushed his sleeves and looked up at the pitch-black sky. There was no moon tonight, only the wind howling softly through dead branches. Please donate and support me. 75, Chapter 75, I Can See the Future. Wenlan strolled into the clan head's courtyard and saw Uchiha Fugaku sitting there drinking tea, while Uchiha Mikato was carefully grinding tea leaves. Wenlan really couldn't understand it. You could just steep the leaves in hot water. Why did the Japanese insist on grinding everything into powder until it looked like soup? He walked over and plopped himself down in a chair without ceremony. Mikoto smiled gently when she saw him. Wenlan is here. Aunt Mikoto, clan head, Wenlan greeted them, taking the tea from Mikoto's hands. Thanks. You've brought me quite a big headache, Fugaku said, setting his teacup down and looking at Wenlan. The Rinnegan, pretty rare, huh? Wenlan curled his lips slightly. Humph. Rare things mean trouble, Fugaku snorted. Still, he didn't intend to dwell on it. After all, the people were brought back by Namikaze Minato, and he had no grounds to pursue the matter aggressively. There was, however, one thing that had been bothering him deeply: how Wenlan had known he'd awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan. At first, Fugaku hadn't wanted to ask. But the more he thought about it, the more curious he became, and finally he spoke up. Wenlan took a sip of tea and said calmly, "Clan head, what you know might actually be less than what I know." He opened his Sharingan and pointed at his own eyes. Special dojutsu abilities don't exist only with the Mangekyo. Your 3-tomo Sharingan has a unique ability too. Fugaku frowned slightly. Yes, Wenlan nodded. My eyes are special. I can see the future. Clatter. Fugaku's pupils shrank violently. Mikoto dropped the teacup onto the table, staring at Wenlan in shock. Wenlan looked quietly at the two of them as tea steam slowly rose. Clan head, there are some things I can't explain clearly. You just need to know that everything I do is for the sake of the Uchiha. Fugaku fell silent for a long time. His fingers trembled faintly before he finally spoke in a low voice. If that's really the case, then what will the Uchiha's future be? You heard what I said that day too, didn't you? Wenlan replied. I saw the future. Under your wise leadership, the entire clan dies out. Those words Wenlan had spoken that day echoed in Fugaku's mind, making his heart pound every time he recalled them. Was what I did wrong? Fugaku's fingers dug deeply into his palm, his voice hoarse as torn cloth. In truth, the moment he had backed down when Wenlan forcefully reclaimed his ninja blade, a crack had already appeared in his heart. But hearing Wenlan say this today shattered it completely. His Mangekyo Sharingan had only lit up once, never again after that. Yet Wenlan knew its secret. Because of that, Fugaku found it impossible not to believe Wenlan's claim of seeing the future. If you can see the future, Fugaku asked, lifting his head, bloodshot eyes staring at Wenlan. Why not just tell me directly what I should do? If I told you outright, Wenlan said, tracing circles along the rim of his teacup with one finger. Wouldn't you have just thought I was insane? Besides, my 3-tomo Sharingan awakened on the Kirigakure battlefield. After that, it was non-stop warfare. When would I have had the chance to talk? Fugaku fell silent for a moment, then finally nodded helplessly. Wenlan, when you grow up, you should take over as clan head. Wenlan stared at Fugaku in shock, then sprang to his feet. What the hell? Uchiha Fugaku, that's repaying kindness with betrayal. Fugaku's previously gloomy eyes instantly widened. He glared at Wenlan angrily. You brat, you're getting more and more disrespectful. By seniority you're my nephew, by position I'm your clan head, and you dare call me by name. Wenlan pouted. What's so great about being a clan head? You have to think about the entire clan, everything's restrictive. Forget clan head, even if you gave me the Hokage position, I wouldn't take it. Up earlier than a chicken, sleep later than a dog, even a dog wouldn't want that job. The last 4 words made Fugaku's veins bulge. He slammed the table, grabbed his teacup, and hurled it at Wenlan. Get out. Wenlan quickly dodged. Only then did he realize what he'd said. Wasn't he basically calling Fugaku a dog? Mikoto, instead of worrying, covered her mouth and laughed softly. Wenlan gave an awkward grin. Ahaha, don't be mad. Sorry, but I still have 3 serious matters to discuss. Fugaku snorted and sat back down, his expression still dark. Wenlan's smile vanished as he spoke solemnly. First, from now on, aside from Uchiha clan's men, anyone, including ANBU or even the Hokage, who approaches the clan grounds without reporting first is to be killed on the spot. Fugaku frowned. Does that include Minato and your little girlfriend? Wenlan scratched his head awkwardly. They're exceptions. He then continued. Second, in a remote, rarely visited area within the clan lands, build a secret chamber. It must be completed within 3 days. I can't explain the details, but the fewer people who know about it, the better. Once it's finished, no one is allowed near it, including you. At this point, Wenlan's expression turned deadly serious. Fugaku's eyelids twitched. He could tell Wenlan was planning something big, but when he thought of those eyes that could see the future, he finally nodded. Third, I plan to leave Konoha for a while in the next couple of days. What are you going to do? Fugaku frowned sharply, rejection almost spilling out of his expression. To find a few people. Don't worry, nothing major, Wenlan said calmly, though his tone carried firm resolve. Fugaku thought for a moment, then said, take Uchiha Shursui with you. Wenlan looked at Fugaku speechlessly. But after thinking about Shisui's, gets sold out and still helps count the money, personality, it might actually be better to take him along. Otherwise, things might end up like in the original story, brainwashed by the third Hokage. Even though Minato had become a Hokage candidate, Hiruzen Sarutobi hadn't stepped down yet. There was still some time before Minato officially became the fourth Hokage. Alright, Wenlan agreed. After finishing the discussion, Wenlan left the clan head's courtyard and returned to his own home. When he opened the door, he saw Pakura sitting by the pond, playing with the water again. Wenlan truly felt Tsunagakure's obsession with water now. She'd been away from the desert for so long, yet whenever she had nothing to do, she still sat by the pond. Hearing movement behind her, Pakura stood up and flicked the water droplets from her hands. She turned toward Wenlan with a gentle smile in her eyes. You're back. You probably haven't eaten yet, I saved some food for you. Wenlan rubbed his stomach. He really hadn't eaten, so he nodded. Alright, thanks. Pakura went inside to heat up the food, while Wenlan headed to the bathroom to wash up. His house had a proper bathing room. He used to enjoy soaking in a wooden tub while staring at the sky, but ever since Pakura moved in, that habit had quietly disappeared. After finishing his bath, Wenlan came out wearing a robe. Pakura was just bringing the dishes out of the kitchen. When she saw him like that, she froze for a moment, then let out a soft laugh. Please support me. 76, Chapter 76, The Final Evolution of the Sharingan. Wenlan lowered his head in confusion and glanced at his bathrobe. What's wrong? He asked. Pakura smiled softly and shook her head. Nothing. It's just the first time I've seen you wearing a bathrobe. Wenlan shrugged, sat down at the table, and started eating heartily. In the Hokage's office, Minato reported everything that had happened during the Rain Country mission, including Wenlan's ultrafast regeneration ability. This was something Minato simply couldn't conceal. After all, there were 5 ANBU present, he couldn't exactly kill them to keep it secret. The third Hokage took a deep drag from his pipe and slowly exhaled a wisp of smoke, which curled through the silent office. Hiruzen Sarutobi's first thought was Senju Hashirama. But even Hashirama couldn't regenerate from having only a single arm left. When he heard that Danzo had used Edo Tensei to summon both the first and second Hokage, Hiruzen was furious. He removed the pipe from his mouth and tapped it against the edge of the desk. What truly concerned him now, however, was the Rinnegan. He wasn't surprised that the Rinnegan had appeared in the ninja world. Back during the Second Shinobi World War, Jiraiya had stayed in the Rain Country for a time. According to Orochimaru and Tsunade, it was because of 3 children, one of whom possessed the legendary Rinnegan. After Jiraiya returned, Hiruzen had questioned him about it, but Jiraiya never revealed anything about Nagato. Later, both he and Danzo had sent people into the Rain Country to search, but they found nothing. Eventually, the matter faded away. And yet now, Wenlan and Minato had brought that very person back to Konoha. Just as Hiruzen was about to stand up and go see the Rinnegan for himself, an ANBU suddenly rushed in, dropped to one knee, and reported, Hokage sir. Several ANBU assigned to monitor the Uchiha clan compound have been attacked. And the Uchiha have announced to all of Konoha, anyone who approaches Uchiha territory without prior notice will be killed on sight. Hiruzen's pupils shrank sharply. He immediately realized that the situation had completely spiraled out of control. He had originally agreed to give the Uchiha 3 high-ranking positions to placate them. However, the ANBU surveillance had never been withdrawn. The Uchiha had always known they were being watched, but they had never acted. Hiruzen had assumed the Uchiha just wanted a symbolic concession. He gave it to them and planned to step down soon anyway. But the surveillance, in his mind, could not stop. This time, however, the Uchiha had openly torn their faces with him. Previously, Konoha had 4 individuals with Kage-level strength. Hiruzen Sarutobi Shimura Danzo Namikaze Minato Orochimaru. But Minato would never oppose the Uchiha. Danzo had now been crippled and imprisoned. That left only Hiruzen and Orochimaru. Yet from Minato's account, Wenlon had easily killed Danzo, possessed an eerie regenerative ability, and could even cut through a tailed beast bomb. His strength had already surpassed the level of a normal Kage. Wenlon alone was enough to make Konoha uneasy. If Hiruzen continued to act stubbornly, it would inevitably lead to catastrophe. The Uchiha could be part of Konoha, but if pushed too far, Konoha could just as easily become the Uchiha's enemy. After a long silence, Hiruzen finally said, "Withdraw the ANBU. From now on, there will be no more surveillance on the Uchiha." Then he looked at Minato. "I've already discussed it with the daimyo. In 1 month, you will assume the position of Hokage." That night was destined to be anything but peaceful. Fighting around the Uchiha clan compound never stopped. Explosions, shouts, and clashes echoed non-stop. Pakura sat on the roof of Wenlan's courtyard the entire night. Meanwhile, Wenlan slept soundly in his room, as if none of it concerned him. The next morning, as Wenlan was brushing his teeth, he heard knocking at the door. Pakura was catching up on sleep. Wenlan walked out to the courtyard with a toothbrush in his mouth and opened the door, only to see a completely exhausted Fugaku and a clearly confused Itachi. "Yo, clan head, Itachi, morning." Wenlan greeted cheerfully. "Morning my ass. I didn't sleep all night." Fugaku snarled as he shoved Wenlan aside and stormed into the courtyard. Itachi raised his hand as if to stop him, but hesitated and said nothing. Wenlan didn't get angry. After all, he had just thrown Fugaku into the fire. Letting him vent was only fair. After Wenlan finished washing up, he saw Fugaku and Itachi sitting on the veranda. Wenlan brought over 2 cups of water and set them down beside them. Fugaku snorted. "Last night, the Kohara faction sent 3 jonin and 20 chinin. The Mitokado faction sent 1 jonin and 13 chinin. The Shimura faction sent 2 jonin and 30 chinin. And foreign spies swarmed in as well, 23 jonin in total." Wenlan shrugged, took a seat with his cup of hot water, and said calmly, "Wasn't that expected? The Rinnegan's appeal is enormous." Fugaku glared at him, barely restraining his anger. "You're relaxed about it, but the entire Uchiha clan became a target because of you." Itachi lowered his head silently, his fingers unconsciously rubbing the rim of his cup. Wenlan took a sip of water, his expression tranquil. "Did you kill them all?" "We did," Fugaku nodded. He knew this was a turning point for the Uchiha, and one where no one could truly find fault. Although 3 Konoha clans had tried to take advantage of the chaos, many of those infiltrators were foreign spies. If those 3 clans tried to demand accountability later, the Uchiha could simply respond, "We thought they were enemy spies and killed them." Everyone would know it was an excuse, but no one would dare tear their faces apart. If they tried to make trouble, the Uchiha could counterattack with accusations of colluding with foreign enemies, instantly turning the situation against them. They wouldn't even be able to deny it. After all, were your clans ninja or were they not sneaking in together with enemy agents? That fact alone was enough. Through this incident, the Uchiha had also sent a clear message to Konoha. The Uchiha are no longer the Uchiha of the past. If you continue to bully us as before, this is the fate awaiting your ninja. Wenlan set his cup down, his gaze turning cold. Last night was only the beginning, not the end. The Rinnegan is the eye of the Sage of 6 Paths. That name alone is enough to drive the entire ninja world mad. Just a name. Fugaku was startled. He didn't understand why Wenlan called it a pretext. The corners of Wenlan's lips curled upward as he looked at Fugaku. "Clan head, you don't really think the Mangekyo Sharingan is the final evolution of the Sharingan, do you?" Fugaku froze. When he connected that statement with all the talk about the Rinnegan, he suddenly shot to his feet. His eyes widened in shock, emotions surging so violently that his Sharingan activated unconsciously. Hot water spilled onto his clothes, but he didn't even notice. "You mean, the final evolution of the Sharingan is. His voice faltered. He couldn't even bring himself to say it out loud. Wenlan smiled, and slowly nodded. "Please donate and support me." 77, Chapter 77, People of the Uzumaki Clan. For the Sharingan to evolve into the Rinnegan, the conditions were nothing short of brutal. First, the Sharingan had to awaken into the Mangekyo Sharingan. That requirement alone eliminated 99.99999% of the clan. Even if one did awaken the Mangekyo, they would still need the flesh or cells of the reincarnations of Indra and Asura in order to open the Rinnegan, and even then, the awakening process was extremely slow. Therefore, if Wenlan wanted to awaken the Rinnegan, his path was clear. Step 1. Awaken the Mangekyo Sharingan. Step 2. Obtain cells from Senju Hashirama or from Uzumaki Naruto and Uchiha Sasuke. Why not Madara Uchiha? Because no one knew where Madara had died. Where would he even get his cells? Fugaku sat there in shock for a long time before finally lowering himself back into his seat. He didn't ask about the method of awakening the Rinnegan. He knew himself well enough. Awakening the Mangekyo alone was already an almost impossible feat. The Rinnegan was simply beyond his reach. At that moment, an Uchiha ninja hurried in and dropped to one knee. Clan head, third elder, young clan head, Namikaze Minato and Uzumaki Kushina are at the entrance to the clan grounds. They sent me to report. Fugaku frowned slightly. Didn't I say Minato doesn't need to report in? The Uchiha ninja replied awkwardly. I said the same thing, but Namikaze Minato said he didn't want to put you in a difficult position, so he insisted I come inform you. Fugaku immediately understood. Minato was worried about people finding fault with him. Invite them in. Have them come straight here, Wenlan said directly. The ninja glanced at Fugaku. After Fugaku nodded, he lowered his head. Yes. After the ninja left, Wenlan smiled at Fugaku. They're probably here to see Nagato. Does Minato want the Rinnegan too? Fugaku frowned, but quickly shook his head. No, if he wanted it, he would have acted on the way back. Wenlan nodded. Actually, Nagato is from the Uzumaki clan. This time, it's probably Kushina who wants to meet a member of her own people. Indeed, after the Uzumaki clan was wiped out, the official story was that everyone except Kushina had died. Even Kushina herself believed that. But in truth, there were survivors, Nagato, for example, and Wenlan suddenly froze. He remembered two other tragic Uzumaki clan members from the original story. Karen, and Anoka, also known as Anaha. Karen was well known, but Anoka was a TV original character. She was another Uzumaki survivor scattered after the clan's destruction, later taken in by the Land of the Sea. The Land of the Sea specialized in researching summoned beasts. Many ninja villages sent shinobi there if they lacked suitable summoning contracts. Anoka often used sealing techniques to suppress rampaging summons, but in the end, she died at the hands of a summoned beast. Karen definitely needs to be saved, Wenlan thought. In the original story, Karen is the same age as Sasuke. She should be about to be born. That means her mother can be saved too. He pondered for a moment, then slowly nodded. Soon after, Minato and Kushina were led inside by an Uchiha ninja. The moment Kushina entered, her eyes swept the area anxiously, but she didn't see the red hair she was expecting. She immediately turned to Wenlan and Fugaku, clearly agitated. Clan head Fugaku, Wenlan, Minato said there's someone from my clan here. Is that true? Wenlan looked helplessly at the hot-tempered Kushina and said to Itake beside him. Itake, go help call them over. Naturally, Wenlan wasn't going himself. He didn't even know where Nagato and the others were staying. Itake nodded and quickly ran off. Minato smiled apologetically and scratched his head. Sorry about this. After I told Kushina last night, she couldn't stop thinking about it. If I hadn't used, it's too late, we should rest, as an excuse, she would have rushed over immediately. It's fine, Wenlan waved it off. Aunt Kushina's just worried. It's rare to meet someone from the same clan. Then he added. But Aunt Kushina, lower your voice a bit. Pakura stood guard all night and just fell asleep. Kushina immediately covered her mouth like a startled cat. Sorry, I didn't know. After Minato and Kushina sat down, Minato's expression turned serious as he looked at Fugaku. I heard fighting here last night. I wanted to help, but the ANBU stopped me. How were the Uchiha casualties? Wenlan rolled his eyes hard. Minato-senpai, you really underestimate the Uchiha, don't you? This is Uchiha clan territory. Casualties. Fugaku nodded calmly. Last night there were basically 0 casualties. Wenlan froze, then stared at Fugaku. What do you mean basically? Someone got hurt. Fugaku sighed and shook his head. One Chunin fell off a rooftop during the fight and sprained his ankle. The 3 of them fell silent. That's 0 casualties, damn it. Who the hell counts a sprained ankle as a casualty? Wenlan's mouth twitched. After a long pause, he said. Clan head Fugaku, that, basically, was used very precisely. Minato couldn't help laughing and quickly covered his mouth. Kushina blinked, trying desperately not to laugh as well. Wenlon tried to hold it in, failed, stood up, and snapped. Sprained ankle counts as an injury. Clan head, that kind of statement is like farting out of your belly button, how did you even come up with it? At that last line, Kushina finally lost it and burst out laughing, then immediately covered her mouth again when she remembered Pakura was sleeping. Her shoulders shook uncontrollably. Fugaku glanced at Wenlon helplessly and coughed twice, trying to maintain his dignity, but the twitch at the corner of his eye betrayed him. Minato lowered his head, shoulders trembling as he struggled to suppress his laughter. After a moment, Wenlon spoke again. Looks like that old bastard Sarutobi still has a problem with the Uchiha. Everyone understood what he meant, Minato's earlier line. I wanted to come help, but the ANBU stopped me. As Minato and Fugaku frowned, unsure how to respond, Wenlon slapped his thigh. Why care what that old bastard thinks? He won't be Hokage for much longer anyway. Fugaku froze for a second, then suddenly realized something. Right. If you're about to stop being Hokage, why the hell should we care about your opinion? Just then, hurried footsteps sounded outside. Itachi returned, bringing Nagato, Konan, and Yahiko with him. The moment Kushina saw Nagato's deep red hair, her body trembled violently as she stood up. Nagato froze as well. That unmistakable, blazing red hair. The same as his. The same as his mother's. Please support me.
Every novel listed in the description comes with permanent access to the audiobook on Telegram. You pay once, and if the novel is still ongoing, you'll receive all future updates automatically. No extra cost. Choose your novel from the description, then DM me on Telegram, WhatsApp, or Discord. After payment via PayPal, Ko-Fi, or Patreon, you'll get instant access. Simple, secure, lifetime listening. Guys, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification button. Your support means a lot.